Look out! It's only two middle-aged geeks on film.
We're gonna get sued one of these days, you know.
You know what? It'd be totally worth it. I keep thinking we should do 2 episodes where we basically parody it, where you play Brett Goldstein in one and I play Brett Goldstein in the other, and we do the entire episode where we're talking to each other.
I mean, I guess the good side of that would be that if we were to get sued, that means that somebody on his team, or maybe even him himself, saw it. So he watched it. So maybe that's the way to go. I mean, then again, that's how restraining orders are formed. So I'm not sure that's what we want either. Or,
Yeah, but also, I mean, there's the whole parody aspect of it and like the fair use law. Like maybe you couldn't sue us.
I almost kind of feel like he's a good enough dude that he kind of appreciate the fact that somebody's watching. He's big more the guy that's like, because he always seems like very like shocked when somebody, his guest, like has watched the show. He's like, oh, you know the show kind of thing. It's like, so I almost feel like he'd always be more happy that someone's watching the show and like loved it enough to do it, like a parody of it or whatever. So maybe he'd actually be okay with that. I mean, who knows? Maybe we should start doing it on Patreon, see how it goes, or maybe Patreon exclusive. We'll do it, see how it goes. Speaking of Patreon exclusive, I learned something today. I learned something in my.
That was a hell of a segue. I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. Like you immediately were like, speaking of it, I just fucking took over. Like fully took over.
I did want to say this. I want to get it out there. Some of you cheeky bastards out there have seen our two middle-aged geeks on the Incredible Hulk. And that's because I learned you cannot schedule a members-only video on YouTube. You can schedule a video. You can schedule a members-only live stream. You can schedule a video to go from members-only to public, but you cannot schedule a members video to go live to the members-only, because that's what happened. I did Incredible Hulk. And also, I looked up today, and at least 5 of you cheeky bastards have already watched it. And you know what?
Good for you.
Because it's a good Patreon and watch Iron Man now.
Yeah, like I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm almost happy for them.
It
was a good episode.
It's a fun episode. It's a really fun episode. Both of our MC episodes have been some of our most fun experiences we've had making this show, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So, it's so funny because we were talking about it, and like if you haven't, unless you're on the Patreon and you haven't listened to the Iron Man one, we had a realization about halfway through the episode that we say out loud while we're doing it, that we realized we should have done like an episode just about the MCU itself, like
intro
and an intro to it, because the Iron Man episode kind of became that.
It did. It really did. There's so much more about the actual MCU, what happens and goes through it. Then we got it's about halfway through, like 40 minutes in, I'm kind of like, we really got to talk about Iron Man specifically.
Well, to be fair, we were still talking about it.
Right. It was usually in relation to what the MCU began, because obviously Iron Man was the big building block, the foundation of what the MCU is today and everything else. But yeah, it was all about like how that related to the whole ball of wax instead of specifically the film Iron Man. We did get there in the end, though. I think we did. We did get there in the end. Just it was a little different, a little longer than our usual episodes.
No, but it was good.
It was good. It was really good. It was a great.
It almost sounds like we're trying so hard to sell it as a Patreon thing, but it's more just like I was so thrilled with how it turned out.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't wait for these to go live. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be funny, because I think this is scheduled to go live like on the main channel in like 6 months, like December or something like that. That's how much we got to go. So it's a long time for you guys to wait. Absolutely. And it's gonna be weird going, wow, we recorded this back in March. What's changed in the world since then? But
don't ask questions we don't want answers to right now.
It's a good point. I don't know what's going on there, but
we could use
some hope.
I have a hope. She's laying behind me right now. You can see the back of her legs on the video right now. She's like passed out in front of the Blu-rays.
I was almost making a segue into our film today. I was almost doing that because, like, Hope, Superman.
It's been 4 minutes.
I know, but it seemed like a perfect way to do it that time. Hope, but then you took over, made it a better segue to go into because animals are awesome.
Yes.
Speaking of animals, I'm wearing the Two Middle-Aged Geeks on Film. I am that guy. I'm wearing my own podcast shirt on the podcast itself.
You are an animal.
Get this at TeePublic. But the animals are. It's like I wanted to show it off. Kind of like we gotta like excuse the cat for the dog fur I have on it, because like my dogs have been all over.
I look really good on a sweatshirt.
Yes, you do.
That's a weird thing to say out loud, but I look really good on a sweatshirt.
You're right on my heart. Right there.
That's really sweet, actually. You're right in mine too. Although right now it's Megavolt, and that feels a little weird because I'm wearing my dark. You can't like the Mike is kind of in the way, but it's a Darkwing Duck spirit jersey because there's only so much Darkwing Duck merchandise in the world, and if it exists, I'm probably going to find it.
You have every one, yeah, pretty much.
Because Darkwing Duck, man.
I get it.
Do you remember when, like, the 90s, when the show was kind of on and, like, popular, and you could go and get cereal boxes that had the UPCs, and then you could, like, get Darkwing Duck
Trade
merch?
them in, yeah, trade it in or whatever. Absolutely.
Do they do that stuff anymore? Like, obviously not just with Darkwing
Yeah.
Duck, but, like...
I don't know. I don't. It's definitely not like it used to be. 'Cause, I mean, it used to be, that goes back even before that, back to like the Kenner Star Wars days,
Oh,
where you
yeah.
would collect like Kenner characters, you'd cut out the things, and you have to mail it in to get like the special Boba Fett
Yep.
action figure or whatnot. So, but you don't mail things in anymore. Now it's all like scanned, and which is actually better, probably, honestly.
Probably better for the environment, to be fair.
It's easier to boop, boop, and done. I don't know if they do that anymore with the cereals and box. We're middle aged. We're not youngins anymore. We don't have.
We're not. You know what's funny about that? So there's actually YouTube channels now that are dedicated to, like, they'll get a 4 or 5 hour block that they found someone taped off of like a VHS, and they upload them, and they're of like Saturday morning blocks from like Fox Kids or like Kids WB or Disney One, and it's like the legitimate day's block of television, and they upload it, and you can watch it with all the commercials and shit.
Wow.
And so every once in a while, if I'm feeling super nostalgic on a Saturday morning, like I'll pour a bowl of cereal and I'll put one on.
Right.
And dude, the freaking nostalgia wave of just like watching that stuff and like having a bowl of cereal, and I'm like, man, we had it good as kids. Like,
the funny thing is about that, we actually around here, there's a theater, an old theater that actually will do
you
stuff
told
like
me
that,
about
called
this.
like cereals. Like it's cereal, and like you bring you don't go you go to the movie theater, you sit on couches, and on the big screen they will play these big blocks of old Saturday morning cartoons that you get to eat cereal and chill in a butt. You have blanket, and it's like it's such a cool. This is such a cool experience. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fucking amazing. Well, I don't know, man. Like, you know, I'm all about experience and stuff. Obviously, you know, I run like my own monthly movie club thing at the house too. It sounds so weird.
I have to throw you under the bus a little bit. It's kind of funny about this. Well, you do. He does this all the time. He does these great movie nights, awesome movie nights. And he has a text chain with me and our friend Jeff Alderman. And he'll just throw out, like, this is movie night, and he'll throw out all the trailers he's playing before the movies, because it's always a double feature, and it's trailer before each movie. And he goes, I want you to guess what movie this is. And Jeff and I was like, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? And like, we didn't realize that like he had this system where like
it's always a system.
There's always like an actor involved in one of the trailers before would be in the final product, and there'd be one like thematic thing. But me and Jeff are like scouring through. I'm looking for thematic connections between all of them, and like they're like random ones. And I'm like, I have no freaking idea. And then like he threw it out there. He's like, and PJ's like, well, it's obvious, guys. Come on, it's the most obvious thing in the world. And I'm like, I don't. Okay. Sure. But then he tells us, and then I'm like, yeah, it was pretty obvious. Like when you told about when I go, okay, well, the actors, okay, if I put those actors together from those films, okay, that makes sense to me more. I think like Costner responds to that at one point, was like, yeah, it's obvious when you know the answer already, you bastard.
You were a little sassy about it. But I love doing that stuff. Like, it's a whole thing. I don't know. Experience is fun. And so that's how we do it. And it's like everyone who comes down for it, they have no idea. They're just coming because they're excited that we're doing another movie night. And it was great because this last one I did was it ended up being action comedies about people making movies. So it was Tropic Thunder and The Fall Guy.
Right.
No one had seen The Fall Guy. So they all got to experience The Fall Guy and watch Tropic Thunder. It was the extended cuts of both. Which was even more fun.
Just out of curiosity.
Tropic Thunder, then The Fall Guy.
Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, because my thought process is that if I started with The Fall Guy, as much as I love it, like, if they hadn't seen it, it might have been less impactful moving into Tropic Thunder. And at least with The Fall Guy being the second movie, it was like the new experience. So you could go in after you'd had a really good time with Tropic Thunder.
Well, also, I think a good way to think about it, me project my own thoughts, is like, you open up with the film that everybody knows, everybody's seen, and because you get
Yeah.
there, it's like a party, everybody's kind of eating, drinking, they're kind of chilling out, you're talking, everything else. You kind of settle in. The second movie, you're kind
Yeah,
of settled in for a while. If you've had your conversations already, you're just watching the movie at this point. Like
exactly.
that's a new experience.
And it's
Yeah.
fun, and I love doing it. So hearing that people do stuff like that, it's like, honestly, I should be running a theater where I do this type of stuff because
Yeah, let's do that.
yeah, like let's do that. Fuck it, let's go buy a movie theater and do that because
Yeah,
we'd be good at it.
we really would be.
Uh,
Be great at it.
legitimately.
Legitimately. Anyway, I mean, that's something I would I mean, I'm getting old now, but man, that would be a great like retirement kind of thing, like half retirement. Just go buy a movie theater and just fucking do it. But I don't know. Yeah, we'll talk about that off air. But
Yeah,
yeah,
things that we should think of. You know what? Because like the Loft does their Mondo Mondays and stuff here.
right. Yeah.
And funny enough, I was going to talk about that anyway because the last one I went to was the Masters of the Universe one, where they very clearly just rip off the opening of Superman the movie, like with their credit sequence, and the Billy Conti score couldn't be less than the discount Walmart version of the Superman theme if it tried. And I say that with reverence and love because I think it's spectacular, but it's just the discount Walmart version. But
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing of like having like a bad B movie night. Like, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't watched Match of the Universe probably 30 years. So
I
I
should
don't
have told you
remember a lot of
just
it.
the opening. I should have told you to watch just the opening.
Yeah, that could have been it because I should have done that because I probably would have been like, oh, because I don't remember any of that at all. I remember like Franklin Jell in it. I remember Dolph Lundgren in it. I remember him going to Earth. I remember like how cheesy it is mostly, but like fun, stupid cheesy, of course. But like I don't remember like that specific kind of thing. But it makes complete sense when I think about what that film was. So I have to go back and
I've
check it
never
out.
done this before, and yet every part of me wants to be like, Paul, we're going to pause this and come back so that you can watch the opening and see what I'm talking about. Because it's so bad. You almost can't imagine just how badly they've ripped it off.
Yeah, I almost. It's funny you mentioned that is actually what I do my Crown Jewel, my Queen podcast.
Right.
That's the exact phraseology I use because I don't play the music on the podcast because of YouTube strikes and all that kind of stuff. I just always like I have the Google Doc and I say I get to the point where I'm like, all right, pause me, go to the show notes, click on this link, listen to the song, come back, and I'll talk about it. That's kind of what I do. You just said those exact words back to me. That sounded kind of strange to me. I just wanted to put out there.
Well, it's almost like we share a single brain cell between the two of us because that is as many brain cells as we both have.
That's about right.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, with both of us aging and shit, dude, it was so funny because I texted him last night. I worked St. Patrick's Day at the bar, and it was chaos, as you might consider. And I got home, and I was laying in bed, and I was like, I had to put an icy hot on my ankle. I just couldn't move. I was like, I've never had this happen before. And Paul's like, he sends me a gift, welcome to the party, pal, from Die Hard. And I realize now we not only share brain cells, we share humor, and we are just the same. And I'm getting older, and I'm watching in real time what's going to happen to me because you strained your finger using a mouse.
It is. I'm clicking on things this morning. Also, I kind of like, you do the jazz hand stretch out. You kind of like, really? Also, I went like, my finger. I'm like, what is happening? I don't even know what's going on. I'm like stretching it out now. I'm like, oh, what did you do?
What'd you
Absolutely did nothing.
It's Chris Farley and Tommy Boy. What'd you do when the door falls off the car? One of my favorite comic bits in literally any movie of all time. Tommy Boy's a masterpiece. I feel like I bring that up a lot.
You do, but I'm okay with it because I stand by it as well. It is a masterpiece. You actually mentioned. I think this is the only podcast you'll ever have heard in your life, which will say that Godfather and Tommy Boy are both 5-star movies in the same sentence.
Yes, correct. And it's the right. It's the right thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree.
Here's the thing. I know that only the Sith deal in absolutes, but the thing is Paul and I are absolutely correct in this.
Boom. I like how you go. I like how you think there. I'm all with you.
I got my moments. They're few and far between, but we make it happen.
Absolutely.
Which I guess leads us to dun, 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 and we just got copyright striked, I'm sure, for me doing that. But you know what, man? Let's go ahead and jump into talking about a movie that I think is legitimately one of the greatest films of all time. It is the grandfather of all comic book movies. If it wasn't for this movie, comic book movies wouldn't exist. You will hear this again in 6 months if you are not a Patreon, and I apologize in advance because I definitely spent time talking about this during the Iron Man episode.
Correct.
And
I did
if
as
you
well.
listen to it, now you're hearing it again. So I also apologize. But if it wasn't for Richard Donner and Chris Reeve and this 1978 film, Superman the movie, superhero films would not exist because it was like the first time it felt like they were being taken seriously.
We
And
had superhero shows and stuff before. There was like obviously
yeah,
George
but
Reeves
like
Superman. You had the Adam West
movies.
Batman. There's some like Spider-Man stuff in the 70s and stuff. But this is the first time like people went, oh, this is something we can let's tackle this as seriously as we can and give it like the respect like that any type of heroic character deserves and see
It
what comes
deserves to
out.
be Ben-Hur.
Right. Exactly. Let's take it this epic thing. We're gonna
Yeah.
make you believe a man can fly.
That was the tagline. You'll believe a man can fly.
Right?
And this movie, even to this day, makes me believe a man can fly.
No.
This film, written by the Godfather's own Mario Puzo, funny enough.
Random fact. I remember that every time I see that, I was like, I always kind of forget that. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's the Godfather writing Superman. Perfect. Okay.
Did you watch The Offer on Paramount Plus?
I did not. I've heard great things about it. I really should watch it.
You really should. I really love it. So because obviously Mario Puzo is a character within the movie. Because it's for those who don't know, The Offer is like what is it, 8 episode or 10 episode limited series on Paramount Plus about the making of The Godfather.
Right.
And they end the last episode at the premiere, and he comes running up and he's like, "So are we going to talk about a sequel? What kind of where's our head at and all this?" And he goes, "I don't know, man. They just offered me the Superman movie. Like they want me to write Superman, and I can't believe it." And I know that like clearly there's a fudging of like
Timeline
how
there
it
a little
happens
bit.
and stuff because that's all things. Like in
Right.
reality, any movie that you watch based on true events is gonna like smudge facts and things like that. Bohemian Rhapsody was like infamous for that.
No.
But you know what? It's all about how it comes across in the movie ultimately.
Well, also, I mean, Brian May Roger Taylor said that in defense of Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, a lot of people like trash on that film now, and I still love it. I'm a huge Queen fan.
I
And
love that movie.
I can tell you that there's a lot of shit they got wrong or they didn't do right. I mean, but I didn't care because this wasn't meant to be a documentary. That's what Brian Roger Taylor said. This is not a documentary. This is a movie. And as long as like the feeling is right, and that's what I feel they got right, then that's the important thing. The feeling is generated. You get the idea. Yeah, you can fudge dates and times. As long as like as long as you're telling the story that you want to tell or that's told, then everything else is kind of like secondary. If you want to watch the exact figures, go watch a documentary on it because there's
100%. Yeah. So, like, they kind of do that though, where it's so funny because he's like, I can't believe it. They just offered me the the script to write the Superman movie, and I always just thought that was really funny because you don't really think about it. Like the dude who wrote The Godfather writing Superman, but then you got Brando in this on top of it. Like, so there's that. And what's so interesting about this film in many ways is that depending on who you talk to when they've seen this film, there's a very good chance they have watched a different version of the movie than you have seen.
That's true.
Because there are so many versions of the movie, whether you saw it originally theatrically, whether you saw the director's cut, whether you saw it on VHS as a kid, whether you watched it on television. Like, there are so many versions of this movie that have existed over time.
That is also always the one that fascinates me. You don't see it very often, but films that have like different broadcast TV versions, that always blows my mind when you think about it. You're putting more footage into the movie that wasn't there. And I know part of it sometimes is like, I know Halloween did it specifically, or was it Halloween or Halloween 2?
Halloween did it.
Was Halloween did? Okay.
Yeah.
Actually,
no, Halloween 2 also did.
Because
no,
the
but
reason why Halloween 2 did, I remember the reason why they did it for Halloween 2 is that they had to fill time without they had advertisements and the film, and only hit a certain amount of time. They had to fill the 2 hour slot or whatever it was. So they actually had to put in deleted scene in to make it fit the broadcast side. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a strange but understandable thing at that time.
One of the Blu-rays out there for the original Halloween also has the broadcast cut. And I believe the Blu-ray for Halloween 2 And it might have been the Universal one. I don't know if the Shout one has it. Also has a broadcast TV cut.
Is it the Blu-ray or the DVD? 'Cause I know that's some of the things too. Sometimes the
Both.
DVDs get
I
it,
mean, I assume the
Blu-ray does
DVD
it.
would have, but like the
Okay.
Blu-ray also had it as a special feature.
I know some films. I can't. There's one film, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. I'm told you I'm getting old. That it was released as a TV version on the DVD, but then it wasn't released on the Blu-ray, which was a strange thing to me. Probably
Yeah.
the rights from the network or whatever, probably, but I don't know.
I mean, so funny enough, and the Blu-ray I have next to me right now for this one actually has the TV cut of
Oh, does it?
Superman,
Okay,
which
cool.
it is a 188-minute version of the movie.
Yeah.
Like
I
it,
considered having us cover that. By the way, if you don't know, we are covering the special edition version,
which is the director's cut,
which is the
essentially.
director's cut, basically. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I considered doing let's leave the longest one. Let's do the 188-minute version, but that's not as easily accessible, so I get it. So
It's
we'll cover
also it's a little meandering. It's very clearly the
Right.
2-night TV cut. Like they did it for 2 nights. They made it as a thing.
Right.
I mean, it's a fun experiment. I love having it. It's one of those every couple of years I'll pop it on just to experience it. There's a couple of things like this. Obviously, the other kind of infamous one for this is the Goonies. The Goonies had the octopus sequence put back in. If you watched it on television, The Godfather had the chronological cut of the movie between 1 and 2, which was a 4-night event, I want to say, on NBC or something like that. Oh, no, probably CBS because it's Paramount owned. But, these TV cuts of things exist. It's always funny just talking to people about like alternate cuts of movies, just kind of in general.
Right.
But
it's always hard I always have a hard time with these cuts because I love movies, but I have a hard time. Like I like when you do a comparison. I don't like watching a movie, then going back and watching the same movie just slightly different. It's always kind of it's like I just not that I lose interest, but I kind of like I get distracted. I'm kind of not as locked in the second time around. I kind of miss things. I tried doing that. Like we're going to talk about next 2 weeks from now. The Donner, I remember the Donner cut came out of Superman 2. I tried watching Lester cut and Donner cut back to back. It didn't work. I was like, I don't like. I mean, I like the Donner cut. I just didn't like watching it back to back. I was like, I don't care about the differences. I want to take it as its own and try to do it on its own. And then, like, if I remember stuff from the original, it's in there. I can discuss it, but I don't like watching them back to back, which some people love doing. And more power to you if you do. If you can do that, that's you're a better man than I am, honestly.
I've only done it once like that. And of all movies in all the world, it was The Butterfly Effect.
Oh, interesting.
With Ashton Kutcher, because it was one of
that's something we should cover at some point.
Oh,
one-off. We got to come up with we have to have a one-off season at some point, and that's going to be in there. I don't know what it's going to be part of, but that's going to be in there.
Yeah, it's got
a lot of love for that movie.
If you've never seen The Butterfly Effect, I could not recommend it enough. But I remember in the early days of DVD, that was one of the first times I remembered watching a movie that had like 2 cuts on the Blu-ray because they really pushed that there was this other cut. And so I watched the theatrical and I loved it. And I was like, oh, there's another cut on this.
Right.
And I legitimately flipped the DVD and put the next version on.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm going to ride this out. I am so curious. And boy, I'm glad I did because it is such a vastly different version when it's all said and done.
It is. I don't know which one I like better. I still haven't decided which one I like better yet. But there's a lot of that has like 5 different endings too. There's like 5 or 6 different endings or whatever on there.
Yeah, but of the 2, so when it first came out, and I watched it, I was much younger. I did not appreciate the director's cut ending.
Okay.
In hindsight, as I've gotten older, I think it is the much ballsier and much better ending.
It is.
Because it's the one that makes more sense to the story. Not that I don't think, like, here's the thing. There's not a happy ending to be had with the Butterfly Effect. Like, that's just the reality of the situation.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter how you watch it, and I don't really want to get in. Like, if you've never seen it, you know what? Fucking, I'm just going to say it. So the director's cut has this whole thing where throughout the movie, he's told he doesn't have a lifeline.
Should we spoiler alert there?
Yeah. I figured. Spoiler alert for the 20-year-old director's cut of a movie.
I get that. I'm saying that's not like a very extremely popular, well-known movie necessarily comparatively. That's one of the things I don't want to spoil the thing. But okay. But, all right, spoiler alert.
I just want to say it. It's because it's weird, also, right?
It is. So just skip ahead 5 minutes or so if you want to stay a virgin to the.
If you want to watch it unscathed. Right. So, like, the original version of the movie has basically the character that Ashton Kutcher plays. He realizes that every time he goes back, he's only making things worse for the people around him. So the only way to make all this work is to basically go back in time and be really horrible to the little girl version of Amy Smart's character so that she will not fall in love with him. They will never be friends and their lives go separate ways.
Right.
And so then, like, at the end of the movie, it's like many years later, and they're both in New York, and they're walking past each other on the street, and like they kind of have this like they
Moment.
notice each other, and they have a moment, and then they keep going, and like neither of them talks to each other or anything. They just their lives keep moving.
Right.
It's a bittersweet ending, but it's good.
Right.
There is a version of that one, to your point, of like one of the very many where he turns around and he like stalks her.
Goes to follow her or whatever.
Yeah,
it's
and you're like, that's a little much. Don't do that. Don't do that.
It actually undoes what you try. I mean, this is your Flash argument right there. Actually, like you just
Mhm.
undid the whole point of the movie in a way. No way.
Yeah, right. So the director's cut ending has this whole thing where like he's told he doesn't have a lifeline on his hand when he goes to this psychic, and then the mom keeps talking about how she's had all these miscarriages
Right.
in her life and all this shit that's happened to her, and you have this realization that all of her kids are going into the womb and ending their lives because they've all been doing the same thing. They all have these powers. So Ashton Kutcher realizes the best thing for the world is if he's not born.
So he
And
kills
he
himself
goes back.
in the womb.
Yeah, because he looks at the freaking ultrasound of the day he was born and he kills himself.
Which is such a weird idea. Like it's like, I mean, I guess it's I mean, it is laid out there that he
Yeah.
has his knowledge. He has a lot of his. When he first goes back, but thinking like an unborn kid could like actively kill yourself in the womb. It seems like it's a weird kind of thing, and it's just very strange. But
It's very strange, but
definitely
like
ballsy.
it's bold.
It's it's dark as hell. I'll tell you
It's
that much.
real dark. And so like then the movie ends and everyone has like these great lives or whatever, and you're like, what the fuck, dude?
Right.
But like
what are you trying to tell me? Don't.
Yeah. Right. And so it's one of those things where it's like, as a teenager, I was like, I don't know if I like this, because I don't know if you know this about me. I'm not necessarily like a dark nihilistic individual. As much as we love horror movies, I'm not really like a super nihilistic individual.
Most horror fans aren't. I found it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Like we're not. We're actually, a lot of the time, we're very about like embracing life and enjoying ourselves and shit. So I didn't get it.
Right.
But as like a storytelling device, I kind of do now. And so like as I get older, it's not that I've gotten more nihilistic. I think it's just that I like the idea of it more and
Right.
like the audacity of it as an ending.
Well, it's the anti It's a Wonderful Life. It's like, I mean, like all
Yeah.
movies like It's a Wonderful Life, and movies, there's a lot of movies out there like that. The guy comes back and you see what it was like if you hadn't been born, how awful everybody else's life would have been. You get to learn all the good things that
Yeah.
like that you've
Yeah.
done in your life. This is like the anti of that. It's like, oh, it's just that's a ballsy take. I mean,
Yeah,
okay.
100%. It's the
So
Shrek.
you suck.
It's the worst. You're terrible, and everyone would be better off without you. Cool.
All right. So
God, what a
the
fucking
opposite,
wild movie.
the opposite of this kind of movie, the one we're
Yes.
covering today. So you're
I love that. I was like, let's talk Superman, and then I somehow ended up talking about the butterfly effect.
Welcome to Two Middle-Aged Geeks on Film, everybody. Tangents of galore everywhere.
Mhm.
No, but you actually know you brought it up for good reason. We talk about different versions of the
Yeah.
film and everything else. And this film, beyond a lot of other films, has a history of just shit going through as far as production goes, design goes, and everything else. Not design, but production and development and everything else. I mean, because we know now, we talk about it, that this was actually Richard Donner was set to basically film Superman 1 and 2 back to back, and filmed much of Superman 2 alongside with Superman 1. And until the producers got involved and things went south, and all of a sudden Richard Donner was not directing,
even though he
Superman
had
2.
directed most of it already.
Right. And of course, Richard Lester comes in of the Beatles fame.
Because they thought that you could just get one dick for another dick, so it's fine.
Substituting a dick for a dick. Exactly. And it's a very different film, which is why we had to make a choice for next week or next episode's film, which we'll talk more in depth why we chose it. But spoiler alert, we chose to do the Dick Donner version of Superman 2 instead of the Dick Lester version of Superman 2. I'm sure we'll talk about both, but we're going to cover
100%. You know what's so funny is that to that point, when it comes to watching the Superman movies, we really have been talking about like different cuts and stuff. I can't remember the last time I saw the theatrical cut of either Superman the movie or Superman 2, because I feel like ever since the director's cuts landed on our Blu-rays or DVDs, depending on like where you were when you first discovered them, I don't feel like I ever went back once I saw like the cuts that they were the way they were meant to be seen.
Um, yes and no. I agree with you. Like, I haven't watched any of the theatrical Lord of the Rings, for
Yeah.
example. That's one thing for sure I haven't done. In this case, though, it's kind of funny we did this because I was going to bring this up at one point anyway, but my son Tyler and I, we have what we call our queue. Is like we share things with each other. I'm showing him some old movies. That he's not a movie guy generally. He's more of a gamer, and he loves animation, independent
That's his
animation.
uncle. I love him, but you know, we're working through it. It's fine.
It's okay. No, but I mean, it's not that he doesn't, but he loves. He's more of a. He's you know what? He just loves quicker things. He's more intense, that kind of thing. But we've done things like that. He showed me a lot of cool. Like I watched Has Been Hotel because of him. I watched a couple of like I'm gonna watch Gaslight District as a trailer that's coming out soon.
Nice.
He's excited about. He's always showed me these things, and I'm playing old. He actually loves old video games. I just played Super Mario Brothers with him, and it's like a lot of fun.
I love that.
Otherwise, we're going through things. By the way, I'll divert for a second and say I diverted from the movies we've been watching because let's get into it really quick. Ted Lasso has become my new comfort show. By far,
it's the best. And the moment you told me this, that you were going to share Ted Lasso with him, I was all, if he doesn't like it, I'm putting my nephew in the middle of the desert with a knife and he can fucking figure it out because I'm not dealing with this. Like, if he doesn't like Ted Lasso, we're going to have a problem.
We just finished the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I could either go on to The Hobbit with him or I could do other things, but he's not a fantasy guy. He's never been a big fantasy guy. And it's kind of like, well, he liked Lord of the Rings a lot. He really did. But he's like, I don't know if I want to go. Let's do it somewhere else. Maybe I'll come back to The Hobbit eventually. Who knows? But I had this game plan in mind. I was like, I'm going to do Tron and Tron Legacy because he loves video games and that aesthetic. So I think that'd be right up his alley. And then we were going to do the Indiana Jones franchise because he saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in film class at school, and he really enjoyed it, and he loves history and stuff. So like, okay, well then we're gonna definitely go back and we'll watch the rest of the franchise, yes, including Dial of Destiny, which means I'm going to be rewatching Dial of Destiny. Obviously,
I mean, you mean the best Indiana Jones sequel of all time, Dial of Destiny, that I'm going to talk about now for the next 20 minutes?
I just want to say it is 32 minutes in. I don't know if when I bring it up, does it count? I don't know if that counts. But
yeah, but I said it right after you.
Yes, exactly. But we're gonna watch. So we are gonna watch the Indiana Jones franchise. We're gonna watch the rest of them. That's what he did. But I had just finished a Ted Lasso rewatch, the seasons 1 through 3. Love that. Every episode makes me laugh. Every episode makes me cry. It's one of my favorite comfort shows of all time. Like it's right up there with Doctor Who now.
Watching it right now.
Right. And so I was like, you know what? F it. I haven't really thought about doing this. I'm going to show Tyler Ted Lasso because he's a very positive person, like Ted in a way. Not with the quips like Ted. He's not that fast talker like Ted, but he's a very positive person. I'm like, I think he's going to love this show. I think he's going to love it. And we're now 2 episodes in, and yes, he does love it. We're watching a few more tonight, I believe. But
I'm really glad that he understood that I was willing to leave him in the middle of the desert.
He did. He completely. I told him. I didn't argue with him. He's like, yeah, I understand that. I get that. That makes sense. I was like, okay.
I love that though. He's so positive and he's a lot like us, actually. Weirdly enough, I can be totally understanding in a situation like that.
Absolutely.
And I should brought him up. To that point, sorry not to cut you off, but I'm very excited that Ted Lasso season 4 is officially happening.
I am as well. I'm a little more. I have some hesitations.
Sure.
But overall, I am far happier than not because I love the characters so much that you could put them in anywhere. As long as Jason Sudeikis is there writing it, and we got some actors we love, then I'm gonna enjoy being in that world again.
Yeah.
Sure, the Switch concept does make me think a little more of Scrubs Medical School because it's kind of like a new concept in a way. There's it's not the same thing. It's a different. If you didn't know,
thankfully, at least it feels like it's been set up.
It does feel like it's been set up. We are having most of the characters come back. I think I'm going to miss the locker room. That's part of my issue as well.
Yeah.
And I guess my big question is, how much is Jason Sudeikis into it? That's what I really want to know. Is he doing this for a big bucket of cash from Apple and his heart's not in it? Then it might not come off as well. I'm hoping that he just took a break after the season 3 is done and said, okay, let me just take a step back and then come back recharged.
Get the vibe that he has looked around the room, as it were, of the world and went, yeah, we need this.
Yeah, it could absolutely be it. And another maybe more cynical note, I'll say, it's not like Jason Sudeikis is laying the world on fire with projects also as well. So it's kind of like he could do his own thing. And that's not a dig at him. He's just like, he comes back. He's got this character that he's well beloved for. He enjoys working on with his friends, with Hunt and with the aforementioned Roy Kent,
Yes, Brett
and
Goldstein.
Brett Goldstein. I was going to say Brian, but I knew it wasn't. So Brett Goldstein
Boy,
and all that
your
stuff.
brain just fully stopped
It
there,
fully
dude.
stopped. It fully stopped. Exactly. So I could see like him taking a pause and go, you know what? I don't have anything like really burning I need to do. I can always do other things later on. Let's come back and have a good time together and see what we can come up with. I think that's what happened basically. But
Yeah, we'll find out
find
either
out for
way.
sure. We'll find out for sure.
So
Bring it
did
on
you
back.
show? Yeah, I was gonna say. So did you show Tyler the theatrical cut of this?
I was about to say this no day. I did not show him the theatrical cut of this film. I did. Superman was one of the franchise. I didn't show him all the Superman films. I only showed
Well,
him
gee, I
Superman
can't
1 and
imagine
2.
why.
3 and 4, I'm not going to bother showing him. I don't think it would be worth it for him to see. Superman 3, maybe, but
I
I
was
don't
gonna
know.
say maybe 3 because there's kind of a video game aspect to it.
Right. But I said I have only limited amount of times. Like, we don't watch movies all the time, and he hates binging stuff. He's not a binger at all. So when I have hit and run opportunities, I want to hit the big ones, for example. So I did Superman. I did actually do this version, but it was Superman 2. I actually had him watch the Lester version. And the reason
Interesting.
why I did that is because that's the one I grew up with, and that's the first one
Sure.
I went with. And so I kind of wanted to show him that. I kind of gave him the opportunity, like, we could do this, we could do this. He's like, well, I want to see the one that came out in the theaters first. And I went, okay, then that's the one I'll show you.
Yeah.
So I went with the Lester cut. So I hadn't watched the Donner cut in quite a while. So I'm hopefully can't wait to do it actually. So
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's so funny because I think since the Donner cut came out, this is a next week conversation, but here we
it
are.
really is. Yeah,
Like
I know.
ever since it came out, I've just kind of always gone back to it. I don't know. Because I look at that one as it was clearly the intentional version.
Yes.
You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that played a part in it. And honestly, that goes with this version, the director's cut or extended version, as it were,
Right.
the 151-minute version.
Yes.
It was the Donner version.
Correct.
This was the one he always intended to make. It was the one he always intended to do. It's just little extensions here, little extensions there, because the original version was like 140 minutes, so it's about 11 minutes longer than the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
Um,
Things breathe a little bit more on some of the scenes, especially like the
yeah,
beginning sequences. And it's kind of funny. I can understand the idea about we talked about this with Iron Man. We said that it took 40 minutes before Iron Man appeared on screen. In this film, it takes 40 minutes before Christopher Reeve appears on screen.
yes,
Not
but
even
his
Superman.
voice sure appears very quickly.
True, but Christopher Reeve does not appear on screen for 40 minutes, and then or maybe 50 minutes, something like that. And then like Gene Hackman doesn't go. Oh, it's 50 minutes. Sorry, 50 minutes till Christopher Reeve gets on screen, and
Yeah.
then it's 60 minutes before Gene Hackman gets on screen. The late great Gene Hackman. One of the reasons why, well, not one of the reasons why, but fortuitous is the wrong word. But the erotic timing, the passing of the great, wonderful, legendary Gene Hackman, right as we're going to do Superman, one of our favorite Gene Hackman roles as Lex Luthor. Rest in
Oh
peace
yeah.
and everything else. But so he doesn't get on screen for 60 minutes. So it's kind of one of those things where if a studio looks at it and goes, wait, you're telling me we're going to have a Superman film and 50 minutes in, we have no Superman? We got to
Dude,
cut this down a little bit. I think that's part of what the mandate was. I was that.
it's so fascinating too, honestly, because one of the things that I've always found interesting is that this film, they decide to do the origin, and that's even for its time feels a little ballsy, but like it is more in line with the bigger Hollywood epics that you would have gotten back in the
Right.
day,
Yes.
because it spends 20 to 30 minutes doing this entire Krypton sequence
Right.
involving like all of what's going to happen with Krypton being destroyed and Superman coming to Earth and Jor-El and Cal, like the whole thing with Jor-El looking at Zod and sending
Right.
him to the Phantom Zone, which is like, it actually works within the confines of the movie without you knowing that
Right.
we're getting a Superman 2.
I mean,
Like,
looking at though, it's like it has nothing to. I mean, very little to do with the actual, like with the rest of the film. It's such a to spend that much time on something. Obviously, it's the catalyst to bring Superman to Earth, so it's important. But like a lot of time when the rest of the film is Superman and and Lex Luthor in a real estate scam. I mean, it's still a weird dichotomy, the beginning and the ending. It does work though, and it works more when you realize that he really intended Superman 1 and 2 to be a big, like, long Hollywood epic story just like we had. I mean, hell, the beginning of this film begins like those like 50s and 60s epic classic. It has an overture. It has
Yeah.
like the big the theater, I always I forgot that when I was growing up. The theater,
Oh,
the
and
curtains opening up,
the kids reading the comic
the
book about
comic
Superman, and
books.
it's like setting up the world. And I love that
Yeah,
because
me too.
honestly, it sets the stage for this movie that's kind of a child's like whimsy
Right. Yeah.
almost. So you're having this kid doing this voiceover about who Superman is, and he's reading this comic, and you realize that like, oh, this is kind of a childlike wonder movie.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's so easy to like get into it at that point because when you're watching it through like the mind's eye of a kid.
Right.
And it's such a no movie starts like that anymore. Like
None.
no there's very few things that are willing to take that jump. And I think that's
Take that
why this
time
movie can
too. Take that
you
time to do it.
yes. And I
Right.
think that's part of why I love this movie so much actually, because it's very earnest. And I
Mhm.
think that um there's this side of people who love talking about movies online who are very cynical, and
Yep.
they talk about stuff like this and they say it's pandering and they say it's cloying and they call it cheesy, but it's like there's nothing inherently cheesy or cloying about this film.
No.
It is a very earnestly made film about
Of
Superman.
of its time as well. The way it was
R-
made is of its time, and that's okay. It's the conversation we had before, and I'm talking about Tyler the entire time in this podcast. But one of the reasons I also brought up Tyler is because we had this conversation. You and I had this conversation about how much we love this movie, but wondering how it hits like
Yeah.
today and today's kind of like flashbang kind of. I mean, Iron Man aside, the whole 40 minutes of Iron Man, I'm not saying Iron Man in the beginning, it's just kind of like this whole idea of can the younger generation glob onto this? And that's one of the things I was actually very curious about because Tyler grew up in the MCU. He loves Spider Man. He does love Spider Man, one
Right.
of his favorite heroes of
Well,
all time. And
and
Spider Man,
that first Sam Raimi Spider-Man to that point is also very reminiscent of this.
it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I showed him Superman, and he really did like it. But it was definitely much more of like an appreciation of it rather than a love of it like we have. And so I
Yeah.
do think the generational thing is there. I think that it can still hit for a younger generation. They might not, but there probably is some obstacles to them going back to it, like a new
Well,
going back to watching it and like watching films of that time. Kind of like me, like going back to like honestly, I'll throw it out there. I know I'm betraying my cinephile roots or whatever you want to call it. I go back to like those older like epics that have intermissions and stuff. I'm kind of like, yeah, I understand that that was a time, but I don't love that presentation of it.
yeah.
But that's what it was like back then. I can appreciate it. I don't love it like some people do. Now this is
Well,
more my era though.
100%. And I think it was we actually did have this exact conversation weirdly enough yesterday.
Mhm.
And it was, I think we both came to the conclusion that it also depends on the age of when you
Mhm.
see a thing. Because
Mhm.
Tyler's a little bit older,
Yeah.
obviously. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm downplaying he's, much older than like young.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
so depending on when you show a kid these movies, like if you showed them Superman at a young age and they hadn't been like totally inundated by all the things around us just yet, like if you showed them Superman the movie before you showed them Spider-Man,
Right.
they'd probably have a little bit more reverence for it because it was a little different.
Mm.
And they hadn't been, they haven't been showed the quick cut versions of a lot of this stuff
Right.
in
Exactly.
how things operate now. And then they can be more appreciative of other things as it goes, et cetera, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
Again, I'm glad he even appreciated it,
Yeah.
but it's a understandable thing because it is of its time, but also of its time when it comes to Superman, and it's something I think Gunn is doing. Uh, it comes across at least that way in the trailer.
Right.
It's earnest. It is
Yes.
trying to be a Superman film that is hopeful. It's one that the world needs at the time. And there's a thing in this movie, that very first Superman sequence when he catches the helicopter and he goes and he sees that it's down, like it's falling off the building. So he goes and he looks over and there's a phone,
Phone booth.
not a phone booth, a
Like
phone.
yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, I can't use that to change. So he goes and he runs into the hotel with the door that spins,
Right.
and he goes through it and becomes Superman. And that first moment when he flies off and he catches Lois, and the "Don't worry, miss, I've got you. You've got me. Who's got
Got
you?"
you. Right,
But
right.
he catches the helicopter, and then it's this 20-minute sequence basically of Superman going around Metropolis doing Superman things, whether it's getting a criminal,
Yep.
whether it's stopping a shoot, like a fight for the cops, getting a cat out of the tree.
I called my note was the montage of do-gooder stuff.
Yes. And it's great because, again,
Yes.
it's earnest, and here's Superman doing Superman shit, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. I love the modern phone booth. I call it the modern phone booth. It wasn't a
Yeah.
booth exactly. I think the same thing. The funny thing is it's funny watching a film of its time, like 1978. This film is making fun in a way of old time, like 40s and 50s Superman,
Yes.
where he fit his own booth. But like it's so different now. We're kind of like, well, oh, okay. But other movies do that now. Like modern superhero movies will kind of make fun of previous films that
Yeah.
way. And not in a mean way. It's in like
No,
a
it's a poking
jokey,
fun sort of way, like a
a
wink and a
nod,
nod.
exactly. Well, they might call it fan service, but it's
Yeah.
good fan service. But it's funny how it's of a time. I got to mention this since you mentioned. I'm going to bring it up. I will say how much of this time it is because there's some of those like problematic things that seep in. And the funniest parts of it, I'm looking at it. Superman saves the cat in the tree.
Oh my
Gives him the
god, dude,
kid,
it's so dark.
and the kid goes in and he's like, oh, mommy, Superman flew down and saved him in the tree. Like, stop lying to me. Like,
Yeah, you hear this kid get whacked right after. I half expect Superman to turn around and grab the mom.
because that's what today would do. Because that's how today would do. Back in like the 70s, that would be kind of like, they laughed at that. That was a comedic thing back then. Because like it's just a totally different time. I'm not even saying right or right. It's definitely wrong.
It's so wrong.
It's not wrong. I can't blame the older generation for that's just what it was at the
No.
time.
But I definitely had the same thought. I was
like,
all, oh my god.
ooh.
Like so it had been a little bit since I sat down with this one.
Mhm.
And
Right.
I was like, oh my god. Like, what a dark moment to end the montage on. Because like that's also the last part of the montage.
I know, like the whole thing is supposed to basically almost make you feel good about Superman. Like, oh, this guy's doing everything. He even is going to be the nice guy and save the cat from the tree. And then he ended with that. Like,
Yeah, there's the one thing that in the entire movie could have probably been cut out.
right.
With her just running in saying, "Mommy, mommy, someone flew out of the sky and saved the cat." Cut it there, baby. Cut it there. Like it's fine.
All right, or did like the Lois Lane in the train bit. Like that's what it could have done. Like it would have been like the earlier in Smallville when you have the little Lois Lane of the train running through, and she tells her parents, she's like, "Oh, Lois, just read your book."
Do you know who her parents are?
No. Oh yeah. I did know that.
That's the original Superman and Lois from the serials from the 40s.
Correct. Yes,
and also that was one of the scenes that was put back into the movie for this. That was not like the scene of the train was there.
Yes.
But they don't have any dialogue in the original theatrical version.
Right. Okay, that makes. You know what? Honestly, I think this is the Mandela effect for me because I have watched this one so long. I don't remember that not being
right.
there.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. Is like I don't think people realize just how much this movie has been changed over time. Because like I guess the original VHS version of this movie, because VHS tapes could only hold so much time back then, was 127 minutes. But what they did was any scenes without dialogue, they sped up.
Right. I remember that.
And then cut the credits at the end.
So weird.
And like, what? What? Like, that's baffling to me. What? And yet here we are. So it's funny. I know we talk about it a bunch. I love Brett Goldstein's Films to Be Buried With podcast.
Right.
And one of the questions in it every time is, what is the sexiest film you've ever seen? And you know what, man? Oddly enough, Superman the movie is the sexiest or most romantic film I can think of. And I don't mean that in like a weird, like the stuff with him and Lois in this is about as charming can get when it comes to like a romantic comedy or a love story. And the whole flying sequence, after they meet on the rooftop for the first time, and that she's doing the interview with him,
Right.
and they're having that flying sequence, dude. That shit's so romantic. With that John Williams score, with her like dialogue and her thinking, "Can you read my mind? Do you know what I'm thinking?" Like,
Right.
oh my god, are you kidding me?
I mean, John Williams is a heavy lifting anywhere he goes. Honestly,
No
his score
shit.
can do anything. And like, oh, okay, that makes sense. No, but you're right. Though they have Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder have wonderful chemistry together, and that both. And the funny thing is, it's two sets of chemistries. It's Margot with Clark Kent and
Uh-huh.
Margot with Superman. They're both very different chemistry, but very wonderful chemistry. You believe exactly what's going on, and that's the biggest takeaway from Superman in general. Not only that, it's Christopher Reeve in general. Like it's always the biggest joke about Superman. He puts glasses on and you don't recognize him. That's it. With Christopher Reeve, I believe it. Like he
Dude,
is such a different person when he has Superman on and when he has his Clark Kent on. Like
I'm
that
I'm gonna
scene we
tell
talked about a lot. When in that very scene, he comes back, he comes in as Clark Kent at the end, after the whole read your mind bit. He comes in as
yes.
Clark Kent, and he has this moment where he's going to tell her. He takes his glasses off, he just straightens up. He's
Yeah.
about to say it, and then he changes his mind. He goes, and he puts his glasses on. He couches down a little bit and goes into the higher, nerdier voice. And it's like, wow, I totally get it.
Here's the thing, man. Look, I know how unpopular this is going to be to a lot of people when I say it. There is a reason he continues to be the definitive Superman. The portrayal of Superman has never been outdone on film, on television at all than Christopher Reeve. And I really mean that. And it doesn't matter that he's had two very not good movies out of the four he was in.
Right.
His performances were always awesome. And
Yes.
the thing is that we look back and revere this performance because it is the version of Superman where I believe Clark and Superman are different people. Because Chris Reeve plays both with such a passion of who both versions are that you can't look away.
Yeah.
It's a fucking incredible performance, dude. That moment when he does straighten up, I made the same note. I'm sitting there watching it. It's like you see him straighten up, and it was the same thing with the mugging sequence.
Yep.
When
Yes.
when the mugger gets stopped and then he shoots at him and he catches the bullet and Margot has like the freak out or whatever, and then he kind of looks up when she's not looking and he has that little wry smile on his face that he got the bullet and
Right.
he
Right.
like drops it on the ground. But he knows. And he plays it up to be like Clark is a sweet dude who's not like I'm not gonna call him like a bumbling idiot, but he's definitely like the awkward,
Not a
shy,
bubbling idiot.
nerdy
Yeah.
guy.
Not a
It
bubbling idiot.
I wouldn't call him fully a bumbling idiot. I mean, like that's the whole point of, he has the whole conversation with Perry where he's
Right.
like, you're all these great things. You just don't have the bite to do anything. Like
Right.
you don't have a fight in you. It's not that he's a bumbling idiot. He's almost too earnest for words.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the whole idea, one of my favorite lines of dialogue, and so like just apropos of the characters, very at the beginning, right after Clark, not the very beginning of the Clark Kent part, the Christopher Reeve Clark Kent part, he's in there with Perry,
Oh,
and
the mom.
the moment he's like,
Yep.
"Yeah, can you send this money every week,
Half
part
of
of my
my
paycheck, half the
paycheck.
paycheck to this address?" And Lois is like, "Your bookie, right? Come on now, I bet for your sweet gray hole there, mother." Oh, actually, she's silver hair, but yeah, and you're
Yeah.
like, wow, that's who this guy is.
Yeah, dude. And he just plays it so well. And it's look, I hope David Cornsweet's amazing. I'm sure he's going to be great.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill did a very good job as Superman. He with very bad writing. And we'll get to it.
Some of it very bad writing. We have a little different opinions on Man of Steel, but we'll get there.
No, I like Man of Steel.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
the movies afterwards that are
Okay. All right. All right. Fair.
yeah.
We'll talk
And
about those later.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Tom Welling, like the less said about Dean Cain at this rate, the better. But like, how many people have played Superman over time?
Brandon Routh, Tyler
Brendan Roth,
Hoechlin.
yeah.
Tyler Hoechlin? Is that
Yeah, Tyler Hoechlin.
Hoechlin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I read his name. I don't think I've ever actually heard anyone say it before.
I mean, I assume that Hochland makes the most sense, putting the syllables together. I could have totally butchered it, and it's fine. But like, they're all chasing this performance. They're
Right.
chasing this version of Superman because to this day, no one has outdone Chris Reeves' performance,
Right.
and I
Right.
don't know if you ever can.
I don't know if you ever can either. It's such a definitive performance, and I, I mean, he's not. I mean, I think they tried to like Henry Cavill obviously is ripped, so he looked
Yeah.
more like a big Superman kind of character that's written. But like Christopher Reeve doesn't need that. It's not like Christopher Reeve's out of shape, or anything. He's very,
No,
very
no, no.
much
He's
in shape.
very
He's very
clearly in shape. He goes, "I'm 225 pounds," and I went, "Where?"
right. Yeah, sir. Yeah,
Good for you,
absolutely.
man. Where?
um, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you. He has something about his it's his earnestness, I think. It's his
Yes.
earnestness, it's his confidence in his performance, it's his confidence in Superman, and even in his confidence of being the bumbling Clark Kent. Because a lot of times you'll see him like something happens and he has to be bumbling, and he'll, despite like it's almost a scene like in any other movie where the character does that, you feel bad for him. You're like, oh, poor guy, poor guy. But like he'll just put a smile on it, like, "Eh, that's who I am.
Yeah.
That's why it's like it's
Because you
just
see the gears turning, right?
right, right.
You know he's
Yes.
choosing to do this.
Correct. Many times over, and it's like, oh wow, you get that reminder of, yeah, that's not really who he is. It's just that's the mask he has to put on for right now at this
Yes.
point. So
God,
good.
he's so good. And, maybe it's unfair to every actor who will play Superman, right?
Yeah,
But it's just like, look at Iron Man. It's going to be real hard for anyone to ever play Tony Stark again.
yeah, that's true.
Like, it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong. It's gonna be tough to follow that kind of role. I mean, it's like for example, people love Heath Ledger's The Joker. It's tough to follow up Heath Ledger's Joker for some people as well. Those
Yeah.
performances that kind of define a generation, define a character. And I honestly think Superman might be the hardest one because you can throw Joker out there. You can do all sorts of craziness type things to make a
Yeah.
Joker and make a different Joker and make it work. Superman is such a hard character because of his absolute goodness. It's
Yes.
tough to play a character with absolute goodness and not come off as like a mockery or like a something you're like, oh, this guy. This
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve never comes off that way. You're just like, damn, I want that. I want to be friends with that guy. I want to be that guy. It's like
Right, dude. And again, to your point with the Joker, the thing with the Joker is you can do different things. Like the Jack Nicholson version of the Joker is
right.
equally as great as the
Yeah.
Heath Ledger version. And look, say what you will about the Joaquin Phoenix movies. I know I have my feelings, but it's like that's a great performance. Like
Absolutely is.
there's no saying that it's not.
Right.
So you have all these versions of these characters that can exist and play within these worlds, but
Right.
Superman is I'm not going to say one note, but there's only so much leeway you can give a character to move like that, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I feel like all of their you just mentioned all the Jokers. Hell, I'm partial to Cesar Romero from the Adam West show.
Right.
Love that performance.
It's an
With,
incredible performance.
with Superman, I kind of feel like every other Superman I've seen, it always feels like the best that they can do is do their best Christopher Reeve
Yes.
because it's just not doesn't it comes across like someone playing Superman. Christopher Reeve comes off as Superman.
Hmm.
Tom Welling actually probably comes the closest because it's
Yes.
not really Superman. It's like all young Clark, and you can kind of get away with a little more, has a little more
Correct.
leeway. Everybody else is kind of comes across like, well, I'm going to do my best version of Christopher Reeve's character. I think
And
you
and you
can
know
do
what?
all three.
Credit where credit's due. Like Brandon Roth's character or characterization is a direct reference to that because it's a
True. He's
sequel.
supposed to
So
be doing
like
it. Right.
it's okay for him to be doing that. There was a lot of people who were like, "Well, he's just imitating Christopher Reeve."
Well,
Well,
yeah, it's because
yeah,
he's
I mean,
playing that. That's the character he's playing.
right. Like he is playing that character. So for him, he gets a pass. And also, I would argue because he got to come back as the character as the Kingdom Come version
Mhm.
in Crisis of Infinite Earths, he got a chance to actually show that he was a really good Superman.
Yeah, he did. I was very happy when that happened. That gave him a second shot, so to speak. And
Yeah.
look, I love Henry Cavill. I do. I think Henry Cavill is great at that role. I think he does
Yeah.
a very good job being like kind of like the Captain America Superman type. He's doing good. He inspires hope. He inspires
Yeah.
strength. But his is more about the strength aspect of it. It's about this is a god, which is what Zack Snyder was trying to do, honestly. And
Yeah,
that's
because he was really
understandable.
focused on the gods.
Which a lot of people don't love. I actually like. I think it's a very interesting way to tackle that. And I do love that version of him. But Henry Cavill still comes across as like that's not still not the Superman that is Superman.
Yeah.
This is Superman. That's
And
like an
you know,
alternate version of Superman. I don't know what that alternate version,
it
but
is.
this is Superman.
And I think I realized, and maybe this isn't fair, but I realized it while I was watching this one, that part of the reason I feel that way, and it all makes sense to me now, is that the moment Superman shows up and does the helicopter, like saving the helicopter, all those people are watching.
Yeah.
They're all there and they're taken by him.
Yes.
And they're not scared of him. They
Right.
don't see this as like a scary moment for them.
Right.
They're wowed. They're taken in by this man who is flying and catches a woman who's falling and catches a helicopter.
It's hope. It's hope, pure and
Yes.
simple. It's like we have someone who is there to help, someone who's going to help us out. That's what Superman's all about.
Yeah, man. And it really lands, right?
Mhm.
Like
It really does.
it really works. And again, this is not to be like a dig at any other version of the character or anything, but like that goes such a long way.
Mhm.
And I find myself every time I watch this reminded that's why Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie has such a specific vibe of like the New Yorkers being
Right.
so involved in Spider-Man's day-to-day life.
Right.
And why every one of those movies you see them celebrating him or
Right.
standing by him or whatever it is. You need that. And I do think that there's something to be said that a lot of the superhero movies now seem to be missing that. I'll even
Mm.
argue that a lot of the MCU stuff does. Like, the Avengers actually does a great job of it. The
Yeah.
first one, weirdly
Yeah.
enough, because
I
we didn't
agree.
understood that. And that was the whole thing about, like, having the, like, low-level people being around while stuff was happening, and then Cap, like, helping the police get people out, then seeing videos of people's reactions to them. That goes a hugely long way.
It lets the audience become part of the movie. You have a entry point.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be a god, but you will be that guy on the street who's looking up at the god, and seeing what they're seeing, and them being shocked and happy, and like makes you shocked and happy. You're like, oh, that's just it gives you goosebumps. The hair stands on
Yeah,
your arms,
dude.
and you're like, oh god, I want to be there.
It's just different, man. It just hits different, you know? And
Hmm.
so I really appreciate this movie for that alone,
Yeah,
because I it fills me with hope. It fills me with joy, and I can't help but love how Reeve presents himself in that.
yeah. Absolutely. Well, because and the funny thing I want to throw out there too, we talked about Reeve a lot. I want to give some credit to Jeff East,
Oh,
who
yeah.
plays the young Clark.
Mhm.
When I was growing, it's kind of funny when I was growing up as a kid. I don't know why. It's obviously not the same person. I almost thought like that was like a younger Christopher Reeve or something. That's
Yeah,
what
it's
my
fair.
head says that. But he does pull off quite the same kind of feat. He comes across as like a very earnest, very going through adolescence like any kid would. He wants to be able to like he has that great conversation with his father. He's like, well, is it showing off when I can do this anytime? I'm just being myself. Why do I have to hide myself? I can just
Yeah.
is it showing off when a bird can fly? I can show off. But he comes across very funny. Like he has the moment where he kicks the football because he gets pissed and whatever
Yeah.
else, and but he runs past the train. He's doing things he probably shouldn't do, but he can't help himself. He has to learn those lessons about restraint and everything else. But he does a great job as a young Clark, and I believe that he is the young Clark. So I got to
Yeah.
Jeff. He says no credit. I never hear anybody talk about him.
I
Excuse me.
I think a part of that also is because Reeve voices him, so I think a
Yes.
lot of people give the credit to Reeve in some capacity just because he dubbed over his dialogue so
Yeah.
that and I could see to your point, as being young and watching it, you hear the same voice.
Right. Right. And that's
So
part of
you're
it.
not really, like, considering that, right, in the
Right.
moment.
Absolutely. You just
Um,
oh, it's the same character. It's the same character doing it. So it's like okay, but it is
als
But it is kinda like he does have the right look, the right delivery,
yes.
the right feelings at
Oh,
times, so
100%. And you know what, man? to that point, I really believe the relationship between him and Pa Kent, and we get
Yes.
2 scenes with them.
Yes.
2.
I forgot how little Pop Kent was actually in the movie
Yeah.
because
It's 2
his
sequences, when they find him and when he dies.
right, and it's the one sequence that really matters because, like, obviously when young, it's when he finds them, they're not exactly having the most much interactions.
No.
It's just a kid out there with a super PP out, just hanging out, hanging out.
Another thing that I don't think you'd get away with these days.
No, I don't think they're there. It's kind of like I forgot. Like, oh wow, it's a full on. Just okay, there you go. Uh,
The super PP flying to the wind.
exactly. But then you only get that one sequence where it's a father like instructing, bringing up his kid, telling him exactly what every kid needs to hear. Obviously, this is a little different scenario, it's a different situation, different. You don't have to tell to hold your hydra powers, but it's the same type of situation you have. You realize the relationship that these people have. That he loves his father. His father's been a great father to him. You can tell that by one conversation that he's taught him well. He has instructed him. He's never been too harsh on him, but he's definitely going to hold him to what he feels is what the hell it has to
Yeah.
be. And he has a son. He's like, yeah, he gets it. He understands everything else. And then he dies. You're like, that's it. That's it.
Dude, the
Okay.
fact that he like, his whole I love this whole thing when he goes, "No, no, now you listen to me. When you first came to us, we thought people would come to take you away because when they found you, the things you could do, that worried us a lot. But then a man gets older and he starts thinking differently and things get very clear. And one thing I do know, son, and that is that you are here for a reason. I don't know whose reason or whatever the reason is. Maybe it's because I don't know, but I do know one thing. It's not to score touchdowns." And I love that because it feels so fatherly.
So fatherly. It's so because he loves him so much. He's so magical to it. And I gotta say, his death in there. I mean, we'll talk
God,
about like
John
Man of
Ford
Steel.
or dude, Glenn Ford. Are you fucking
Oh,
kidding me? Number 1, you got Glenn Ford to be Jonathan Kent.
right. So like, perfectly cast. So well, like he has that gruff exterior of like a Kansas farmer, down to or salt of the earth kind of guy who's family first, loves his wife, loves his kid, not gonna take shit from anybody. But he's a really tough guy, but he's got that heart of gold. He really loves his son. And then he gets that his death is just so powerful in there. And it really focuses the whole movie. All of a sudden Clark was worried about that, like himself, then his death like is the instigator for everything else. And he has that great line, and this is why, and we'll talk about it when Man of Steel happens. The death of Jonathan Kent in Man of Steel is often really derided for being stupid,
Yeah.
and I never had as much problem as a lot of other people did, but
I have a
comparatively,
real problem with his line of dialogue though.
this is the well, we'll talk about all that when we get to Man of
Yeah.
Steel, but this particular bit there here was in this film is why people have a problem because this is so perfectly done because of having the death of his father. You have him at the gravestone. He has that such a great line. He's like, all these powers, I couldn't save him.
Dude.
And it's
No,
like,
well, and honestly, like, you hear that, right? And then God. Then when the next morning after the funeral and all of that, and
mhm,
this idea that he's finally gonna leave and he, the whole fortress thing and Ma's last words to him, "Remember us, son, always remember us." And you're like, "Fuck." Even after all of that, like, they
right?
love him so much, and the Kents are just no longer in the movie at that point.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
it.
craziest part.
That's it. It's kind of funny to me. I realize I'm watching this film again, and I'm looking at the trailer for the James Gunn film coming out, which is
Yeah.
or leading up to. The difference between James Gunn film at this point is James Gunn film, because of everything that's transpired since 1978, is now unafraid to be unabashedly
Yeah.
a comic book movie. Like
Right.
we are doing the Superman from the comics. We are having fucking Crypto the dog. We are having like
Giant
Guy
kaijus.
Gardner, Giant Kaiju, like everything else, unabashedly getting to be like I think that kids would love to have seen that even way back when, but this was trying to be a different kind of film.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see that because I love Superman. I love those kind of things. At the same time, this I understand what they're going for this, and it's a much more grounded effort, and it works so well for its time and for what it wants to do.
And it's still pretty, like, comic booky too.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
other
yeah.
thing. Like, it's a comic book of its time in the same way, because like all the stuff with Lex Luthor, who we've barely talked about, Mr. Luthor, as it
Luthor.
were,
Mr. Luthor. Mr.
Mr.
Luthor.
Luthor, Mr. Luthor, Otis. I fucking love Otis. I love Ned Beatty, and I
I
love Otis.
love that trio is so great.
God,
So great. But to your point, I know you're about to say it. I'm going to say it for you.
yeah.
Hackman's Luthor is a mustache twirling villain.
Yes,
That's
he
what
is. He is straight up a cartoon Sunday cereal mustache twirling villain.
Unabashedly. And you know
I
what? That's
fucking love it.
okay. That is just fine. I love, like, we are in a day and age where we're humanizing villains a little bit. We're looking for motivations, and that's fine. I appreciate that. Hell, I just watched Crimson Tide and The Rock from the 90s, and those kind of like you have those antagonists instead of villains. You get to the later superhero films, you talk about like Killmonger, Loki goes through his thing.
Yeah.
But it's okay sometimes.
Sometimes there's a time and a place.
Just to be a surface level mustache twirling villain, and it works because Gene Hackman just has charisma for days.
God, he's so good.
That's what makes it work. It's like you watch him and you're just like, you smile on the scene, you smile at his smarminess, you smile at his cockiness, and like even if you wonder back and you're like, how does he keeping Otis around? Like Otis is a bumbling nincompoop, as he always says. But like that characterization works so well. It adds, I think, a lot of much needed levity to the situation.
You were followed again. And then Otis panicking and he knocks over the light.
Ned Beatty might be my favorite character. Like, low-key my favorite, because some of my favorite parts of the film. He is hilarious.
He's so good. He's so funny. And he's just,
Otis.
you know, next time you give me my robe, not in the pool.
It's the expression he does afterwards, not just the light.
Yeah.
It's how he reacts to it.
He's just so good, man. Like, I love
Otisburg. Otisburg. It's a little dicky place. Mr. Otisburg.
Yeah. Well, and just all the time that he's kind of like, there's these moments that Lex is saying things and he's mimicking and or copying him, and there's the moment with what more could you ask for? And they do it at the same exact time, and he has this big ass shit-eating grin on his face, and Lex is so annoyed and rolling his eyes. Oh, it's perfect.
Oh, hell, the one at the very end of the film when like he's like, greatest criminal mind of our time.
The villain speech.
Oh my God, these walls. Why you shut up?
God,
it's a little anti like what you would think of, because Lex Luthor being the brilliant villain and everything else, but it adds such a great like little bit of rolling to it. It's so fun. Ned Beatty, underrated. No one talks about him when it comes to this film, but he is one of the secret sauce. Honestly, he is the beating heart of this. He's a beating heart of this film to a degree. I mean, outside of Christopher Reeve, obviously, but like he is he just got that unknown, that secret, you're right, secret sauce, secret ingredient to it. Absolutely.
It's him and Valerie Perrine, because Eve Teschmacher is also equally as like that kind of character. And, you know, her entire arc in the film where she clearly doesn't really want to be around Lex.
Right.
Like, she's very uncomfortable with the situation.
Right.
And the stuff he's doing. And even like when Superman first shows up on the scene, there's the whole her being kind of shocked by the whole thing. And then what does Lex do? Well, he's clearly not of this earth. And she goes, how could you possibly know that? Like, stop being such an asshole about it, basically. And he's like, well, if, you know, I'm the smartest person in the world, and if I couldn't come up with it, then no one else would do this situation. You're like, Jesus, like, Lex is just a mustache twirling idiot in the best way.
Yep. Oh, God. Speaking of, and Miss Teschmacher obviously has that, the great arc.
The ending.
Ending where she turns because Lex makes a big mistake. And like because he has the two
let her mom die.
whistles going, and he's gonna let his mother die, and he doesn't even show any like sympathy, which I don't expect him to. But because of it, he does. He's kind of goes, not for long, and that makes her want to save Superman, so that Superman can save her mother. She's really actually kind of like a Bond girl to a degree.
Yeah,
like a Bond villain in a way. I kind of liken her to the Superman comic book version of a Bond girl in a way. Great performance though. She's wonderful in it.
Valerie Perrine's fantastic in it, dude. Like again, I think that this movie is legitimately so well cast. Like, you know, obviously we spent a good time talking about Christopher Reeve, but you know, again, Margot Kidder, Valerie Perrine, like Gene Hackman, You can't look any other way.
Ashton Cooper.
It's just everyone. Yeah, even Brando, who is clearly phoning the performance in,
Yeah, he absolutely is. Let's not be
is
loud. But it's okay because
really
it works
good.
for Jarrell. It works for Jarrell as the
Yeah.
kind of like haughty or like kind of like monotony kind of thing. Like, it works in that role very well.
Oh, it totally works. Again, totally him phoning it in enough that like Chris Reeve has clearly called it out. He was never a fan of the
Brando's
performance and
performance.
how
Yeah,
Brando acted on set.
right.
But like it works. Everyone's really good in this. I mean, dude, you got Jackie Cooper playing Perry White. Are you kidding me? Like, again, Glenn Ford shows up for a cup of coffee for 2 scenes as Pa
And
Kent. It's perfect.
I mean, Terrence Stamp. He's in
Yeah,
there for
man.
Harpy as General Zod. I mean, I know he comes back in Superman 2, and that was always the intention, but he gets that moment where, like, God damn, I almost want that. It's almost like in him in the beginning, you kind of feel like he's the one that's going to come back and be the villain, right? That's how
Right.
you were set up to think. And like, I almost like, I love Hackman, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, oh man, this guy's badass. I want to see what this guy's going to do also. And we don't get it until Superman 2, but
Guilty.
guilty.
Guilty. Every time that scene it gives me chills.
And
It's
your ass.
ah,
Oh, so good.
it's such a dramatic
Yeah,
opening, honestly.
it is. It is such a dramatic, powerful opening, and then great. It's like a sci-fi spectacle of its time, of the
Mhm.
70s. It's like that kind of like those effects are very, but they're good effects, but they're a little cheesy because they're done the way they're done, and they're not. I would say
But
cheesy
it's
is the wrong word,
practical.
but it's like it's all practical, but it comes across with that vibe of it. Like it looks cheesy now-ish
Sure.
comparatively, but like it works at the time.
And
Um,
it still does if you're,
yeah.
like, on the vibe of the movie, right? And
Mhm.
I find it very affecting. I
Mhm.
actually had that thought while I was watching it where I was like, "I'm surprised how affecting I still find it." And that's a
Yeah.
compliment to it because it's like, "Damn, dude, you're watching this and going, wow, the sets are falling apart. They're on fire. You're watching
Yes.
this shit happen, and you can feel it. It's tangible."
Sci-fi is like they have to come up with something that looks otherworldly,
Yeah.
and yet it somehow like the Phantom Zone, the glass part, that glass effect was great. The glass comes in, like,
Yes.
takes it, all of a sudden they're in the glass. The random, like, hula hoops, like, I don't even know
Yeah.
what they are, but I'm like, I don't know what they are, but they look kinda cool. Like, okay, they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Also, credit where credit's due. Williams does a lot of the heavy lifting,
Oh my
again,
god, does he do a
because the
lot of
score
heavy
is
lifting.
fucking wonderful.
Shocking, I know. Everybody's shocked
I
that
know, I
John
know, I
Williams did
can't
the
believe it.
score.
John Williams made a good score? What? I
It
all I can think about is when Dial of Destiny came out and he got nominated again for an Oscar, and everyone was like, "He's just phoning it in at this point, and they're just nominating him for no reason." And I was like, "Did you listen to the score? Because Dial of Destiny's score is fucking amazing."
fucking amazing.
Like,
Absolutely.
I still listen to it all the time. Like, it is awesome.
All of his score, almost all of his scores are. I want to say, is there a movie too that like, are not as memorable? Sure, but like you look at something like the best scores in history, he has like the top like 10 probably himself, and everybody
Yeah,
else afterwards is trying to catch up.
yeah.
Some of the most iconic scores in film, like that you just hum a few bars and yep, you know it. Star Wars, Superman, Jaws, Indiana Jones,
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. All these are the beginning of Harry Potter, the Hedwig theme. Like these are all ones like so
The
distinctive.
Olympic theme is John Williams.
John Williams, and like let's be honest, you know who knows that as well? James Gunn. That
Yeah,
first trailer comes out, and I tell you what, it wasn't
it
John
worked
Williams
for
scoring it,
me.
but it was the John Williams score, and that did a lot of heavy lifting of that first that first teaser on the guitar, on like the electric guitar. You're like, oh God, give it to me.
Yeah. I was like, "I wanna be in the theater right now.
Yes, I
Please,
know.
please and thank you. Put it in my veins."
Oh, good.
But
So good.
Williams' theme, honestly, even the opening of the movie, because it's the little Williams theme before and then you have the build, kind of like the Raiders March, but like this little kind of jingle of the opening theme while the kid is doing the narration as
Like,
the theater opens and you see the Daily Planet,
yes, the
and then
Starlighty
the
kind of
dun
thing.
dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun, and you dun 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 dun, dun, and like God, what a fucking opening, dude! Once
Yeah.
again, like, and here's the crazy thing. Who's the top billed person in this movie?
Is it Marlon Brando?
It's Marlon
Yeah.
fucking Brando.
Right, it's Marlon Brando. Yeah.
Then it's Gene Hackman. Then it's Christopher Reeve. Reeve is the third billed person in
'Cause
this
he's an
film's opening.
unknown. He's just an unknown
I
character
know, but
actor at
isn't
that
that
point.
wild?
It is a little wild.
And then guess what? You watch Batman 89. Top billed person? Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. Yep, I bet that was probably part of his contract. He probably, "Yeah, you're gonna put me in
Well,
as
but
the,
you're
lead role."
also we have to remember Keaton was like a name, but
Yeah,
not he
yeah.
wasn't Jack Nicholson, right?
No,
And
absolutely.
so a big part of these movies, and we've flipped it since,
Yeah,
but a big part of these movies was if you got someone to play the villain,
right.
a big actor to play the villain,
That's
it
the
would
way
pop
it should
off.
be.
And it
Uh,
should be, right? Not in
'Cause a
a not
hero is only as good as their villain.
well, look, who was the villain in Iron Man?
It was Jeff Bridges as
Right.
Obadiah Stark. Stank. Obadiah Stane. There it is. There, I got there eventually.
I like that.
Stark, Stank, Stane.
But
Got there. I got there.
at that time, he was a much bigger name than
Right.
Downey Jr.
RJ was definitely in rehab of his career
Right.
at that point.
So even to that point, you were doing it. The Rocketeer, my favorite comic book film of all time. The villain is Timothy Dalton.
Yep.
Who's Billy Campbell? I like Billy Campbell. Don't get me wrong, but like you have Timothy Dalton as the villain.
Right. Absolutely. Who was just coming off of Bond at that point. He was just
Yeah.
James Bond, for Christ's sake, at that point.
It,
Yeah,
it matters.
it
And so
does.
it's kind of wild when you watch this in hindsight with one fabulous score, but then you're seeing the billing and you're like, "Oh my god. Like
Mhm.
what in the world?" Right?
Yes, indeed. And it's not only the theme, it's a lot of the incidental stuff as well. You have like the incidental, like the Starlight beginning, like we talked about, and the Krypton music. I'd call it like it's kind of like that kind of sci-fi music. And one of my favorites is like John Williams is great at what we call leitmotifs. They have like
Yes.
characters have their own themes. I love doing that. I love that stuff when that comes up. Star Wars does it wonderfully. But like one of my favorite themes, it's a stupid theme. We talked about him. He's Otis.
Yeah.
Otis has his own theme, and it's just like bumbling dun 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 dun, and
It's
it
so
just
good.
it showcases who this character is, and it adds to Beatty's performance. It really is. When I hear that, I'm like, yep, I can't help but smile and laugh at it. You know, it's just
It
it's such a good score.
it's so funny because that score ends up being very reminiscent to how Hook and Home Alone sound
Mhm,
because we
mhm.
don't get I don't think we realize how often Williams films come from worlds that feel a little bit more fantastical.
Yeah,
So when you get the more like day-to-day type things like that, it's really fun. And it's
yeah.
really like it's a jaunt. And it's
Yes,
cute and it's fun and you're like, "Ah, Otis, look at him go to the music." Like it's
that's kind
great.
of Home Alone. Like the Home Alone is the perfect
Right.
example of that. Exactly what you're saying.
And
Home Alone is
Hook,
just like that. And Hook, but Home Alone's even less fantastical than even Hook is at this
well,
point. Though Home
but
Alone's
the
got the
opening of Hook is what I'm thinking of.
okay,
When he
okay, good call.
like,
Very cool.
the whole, him in the office building has that same kinda, like, jaunt and stuff
Right,
when we
right,
don't realize he's Peter yet, you know?
right, right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He's got such great moments, and they all have great themes. John Williams is just he's God for a
He's the
reason.
man, dude.
There's no one else. It's John top 10 score super composers of all time for movies. John Williams is 1 through 10. Everybody else is
Yeah.
not. Everybody else is
Yeah,
after
everyone
that.
else is I mean, Alan Silvestri sniffs 11.
Alan Silvestri is up there, absolutely. You know, you can
Yeah.
talk Hans Zimmer, you can talk a lot of different people if you wanted to. Michael Giacchino's great recent, more of the more
Oh,
recent
dude.
era. Horner, I mean, uh,
Yeah, I mean,
God, I mean,
obviously, I have a soft spot for Horner because The
yeah,
Rocketeer is one of the all-time greats, The Mask
I'm,
of Zorro, Avatar,
I'm blanking on Star Trek guy,
Star
Goldsmith,
Trek guy.
Goldsmith,
Oh, yeah, Jerry
uh,
Goldsmith. I mean, dude,
Jerry
it's Jerry
Goldsmith.
Goldsmith. He
Yeah,
also did,
a
Gremlins
bunch of other
and
things. I'm just thinking
Burbs
of
and
like
yeah,
I
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Okay. The guy just started, yeah, but Jerry Goldsmith, a lot of people like that are great. I'm sure there's definitely not just one composer for sure. Hell, Trent Reznor and
Oh,
Nine Nails
dude.
himself, recent stuff, awesome stuff. But then
Well,
there's
that
just
honestly, the one thing I'm, like, weirdly excited about Tron 3, because 'cause I'm not excited about Tron 3, really.
yeah,
I really have not liked what we've heard or seen so far,
yeah,
except that Nine Inch Nails is doing the music.
yes,
Because if I
exactly.
can't get Daft Punk, Nine Inch Nails will be okay.
Is a pretty good substitute for Daft Punk,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
So one of the things that's really interesting about this film, and again, it's because it's of its time, Lex's plan is so perfectly on brand for a 1978 version of Lex Luthor. Like, it is just a scheme for land to make money. And yet, you know what, man? I don't hate it.
no,
He's not like a
it's
yeah,
because it is a comic book mustache twirling villain plot. Uh,
Yes.
It's exactly what a 70s, 60s, 50s, 60s comic book villain would do. And Gene Hackman can pull it off that way. That's what makes it work. And when he's pulling it off, you buy it, you buy into it enough, and they treat it with absolute earnestness, and that's what works, makes it work. The whole film is just about earnestness. This is all legitimate stuff that's going on, real stuff that's going on, and of its time. I don't know if you can get away with it nowadays, but like it's like the archetype. Like you talk this plot has been like mentioned in other films later on, like the
Yeah.
real estate scam for Superman. Oh, we're gonna buy it. It's now done differently. Like, we're buying up different parts of the city, and we're gonna.
Mhm.
It always goes back to like this original plot at this point.
Well, even Superman Returns, it becomes him trying to create new land again all over
Right,
again. I mean,
right.
it's the same thing. It's so just perfectly on brand.
Mhm, mhm.
And the thing is that at that time, with the effects the way they are now, Lex and Superman probably wouldn't be able to go toe to toe.
No, right,
So to do
absolutely.
this, it just plays into the wheelhouse, and it being Superman trying to stop him from doing something that hurts people,
Right,
and that's great because ultimately the other thing is he's still going to kill millions of people.
right,
Like
100%. It's still scary.
again,
Yeah.
it's still scary, and Eve Tessmacher is the reason that we know that because
Mhm.
they really make the point that he's willing to let his girlfriend's mother die basically
Right.
for his point of view or for his,
His scam,
well, yeah,
his plan, yeah. By the way, you say I gotta say one of my favorite parts is Gene Hackman's delivery of Miss Tessmacher!
Miss Tessmacher!
There is the scene in there I noticed for the first time, and when Superman comes in, and that's an extended sequence, by the way, too. I believe I remember correctly. The Superman getting to
Yes.
Lex's, with the
Yes.
guns go down there. By the way, the gun part.
Oh,
I'm gonna throw something out there. I'm gonna throw out there. When I was a kid, I saw it somewhere because I love watching the guns rain down on
yeah.
Superman. I used to go in the shower and I would pretend that the shower was like the gun shooting down at me. I was
I
Superman.
love that.
I was like, so
Because it was dude, that whole sequence is great.
right. The heat, the freezing, the fires he's walking through, and he pushes his way to the door. He's like, I think he's coming. Oh, he's coming, Mr. Luthor. He's coming.
My lawyers will be in contact with you
About
about
the
the
door.
damage that you've done to the door.
But then he says that when he screams out his test marker, even Christopher Reeve like jumps. Like here's
Yeah.
Superman, the guy, the biggest, strongest guy in the world. He's like, Mr. Test and he goes,
It's so good, dude.
it's so good. So good.
He's so good. This
Uh,
movie is just so fucking fantastic, man. Like,
oh,
it'd be so easy to be cynical and pick it apart in a 2025 setting, but,
oh, yeah.
like, here we are almost 50 years later. Jesus Christ, number 1.
Right.
But this is a really spectacular film,
Oh my
and
God.
you have to be able to I've said it before, you have to be able to put cynicism aside, and I know how hard that is for people nowadays. I
Mhm.
get it. I do. I totally understand with the way the world is that cynicism is easier, and it's honestly a little bit more enticing to look at things that way or whatever.
Right.
But goddamn, dude, like this movie being so earnestly what it is just really makes it so beautiful and so fun and so charming, and it's so interesting because we were talking about it a little bit. I think that the fact that I love the characters so much, I love the performances so much. I'm so locked in. And you brought it up earlier, like we don't see Chris Reeve until 50 minutes into the movie.
Right.
And I don't care
Right.
because I'm so drawn
Locked
into
in.
the world, and there's no big battle sequence, but there doesn't need to be because it's just such an interesting movie that I'm so drawn in the entire time. It doesn't need to be fully big and fully spectacle and like boom, bang, bash. You know what I mean?
I do, and like it's you could not do that today because comic book
No,
movies, they're a little bit formulaic to a degree. I mean, they're actually very formulaic to a degree. All
no, yeah,
better comic book movies make better sense of the characterizations and sometimes subverting some of your expectations. Those are the better comic book movies, and doing something more uniquely that way. But comic books in general, it's like first act this, second act this, third act is the big action battle sequence. And what can we do to, a lot of explosions, a lot of stuff. And that's what it is. There is no, I mean, there isn't action sequence. The earthquake has action in it, and it is a
Yeah.
definitely a thing, but that's like not nearly what it is today. No, like imagine trying to go to a movie that's the third act. It wouldn't go over. It'd go over like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
Like that's boring, but it works in this film because it's so earnest, and you're already locked in the entire time.
Well, it's so funny because I actually remember when First Avenger came out, it kind of faced those same criticisms because First Avenger doesn't have like a really bombastic third act.
Yeah, and
And I
something
remember
we
people,
love.
yeah, right. And but I also think that that one is really likened back to this,
Yeah.
right?
No, you're right, and it makes sense because Captain America is probably the closest thing to Superman
Hmm.
Marvel has. But you could say it's Thor versus Superman power-wise, but characterizations go,
Yeah.
Cap is the ultimate do-gooder, the ultimate, like, superhero that kind of way, so makes a lot of sense that the first Avenger would be very similar to a Superman movie.
Yeah. And so it's just fascinating to me because we had the conversation about Iron Man. Like the third act kind of loses me because it does go for like the bombastic action sequence, and it's just not very interesting.
Right, yeah, it's it
And
kind of, "Okay, been there, done that."
right, and there's great bombastic third act sequences, we'll get to more of those in the later things, but, like, it's just fascinating to me that this movie where you're right, there is some sort of action to what is being done,
Right.
um, but I think it's also because there's so much emotion built into it, because
Yes.
the whole thing becomes this idea that, you know, Lex has been holding him down under the water with that kryptonite necklace, and Eve Tessmacher gets Superman out, and Lois dies.
Right.
And you have this whole thing where it's like he's bent on saving everyone, but he's also bent on saving Lois.
Yes, that's the personal stake that he is obviously in love with Lois already, or has strong
Yeah.
feelings for her. When she dies, it's like the end of like his Christopher Reeve's yell and scream was so powerful, like during that
Mhm.
moment. Like, I mean, obviously, I think it was helped with some sound
Sure.
enhancement, but it works well. You're like, oh shit. Um, but funny you mentioned that 'cause actually one of the notes I had talking about today's versus yesterday's. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie that like it's almost like you wouldn't accept it nowadays. People would be picking it apart. And like I'm
Mhm.
talking about like the idea of Clark jumps out the window. At one
Yeah.
point, Lex says, and Jack crunches on the window. All of a sudden, the clothes just change. Like the clothes just become Superman's. And like
Yeah.
today, people are like, he didn't take his clothes off. It just magically. How that? There's not. That's not a superpower of his. You just totally go with it. You're like, oh, he was so super fast, and he.
Yeah.
You know, same thing at the end here. You're kind of like, wait, so let me get this right. The ending, earthquake happens, Lois dead, and his job, he's gonna fly around really quickly. He can fly around the earth 7 times very fast. He couldn't fly to do the bombs that fast. And the planet goes back in time, and Lois is alive. And not only is Lois alive and they're back in time, but now the earthquake's like not happening. It's like, wait, what happened? I don't understand what exactly is going on here necessarily. And
Clark
she's
was listening
there.
to Cher, and he heard if I can turn back time, and he realized that that was the only answer to everything.
The only thing I actually ever questioned about everything else made sense to me, but like if you turn back time, that means you didn't
Well,
actually save
yeah.
the quake. The quake already the quake should still be happening now. And but I was like, I don't care. Young stuff.
I actually, funny enough, did have the same kind of thought because there's also the paradox of if he went back in time, technically speaking, he should still be underwater.
Right,
You
right.
know
It
what I
is
mean?
right,
It becomes a little bit of a bootstrap paradox in some
right.
capacity.
Yeah,
But again,
absolutely.
I really don't care.
That's what it is too. When a film is this good and this fun and everything else, you give some allowances to it, and it's
Mhm.
also again part of the thing of like we lived. This is a far different time in terms of um, a far different time in terms of when you're watching a film like this. At that, you allow these things to happen. Whereas today's we live in a much more critical society, film
Yes.
critical society. Kim just texted me because she's listening to us. She said, "There's no mistakes in Superman." She's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because today we have to come to these things and we go, "This is so much. This happens because of this, and why is this happening? And why is this is stupid? Oh my god!" Back in those days, we just watched the film that was presented to us, and we had a good time. It's more about the emotions involved that you're like, "This is fun. This is
Yeah.
good." This is doing exactly what it wants. The feeling is there.
Mhm. 100%, and I think that's why I get so drawn to it, and one thing this movie does really well, we were talking about the, Jonathan Kent and the Pa Kent of it all.
Yeah.
I think this movie does a great job of showing the dichotomy of having 2 very different fathers,
Yes.
And what does that do to someone like Clark? Because
Right.
he does hold the weight of being the last Kryptonian. They show that very well that with the couple of sequences set in the Fortress of Solitude and his
Right.
interactions with Brando.
Right.
And I really love that because there is this idea that, Jonathan Kent is like, I don't know why you're here, but you're gonna help people.
Yeah.
And then you have Jor-El being like, well, you can be a god to these people.
Right.
And like, don't enjoy what you're doing. Like you're more powerful than they are. It's very different.
Right.
And it's about finding the right balance between the two things that these two different fathers are telling you. And I think the movie does a great job with that.
Absolutely agree. And it's kind of bring back to the Brando of it all, the Jarrell of it all. It's very kind of weird going back to watch this movie now and go, oh, here's AI being born.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it's like
Yeah.
that's the AI Jarrell there.
Yeah,
It's like,
because it's Jor-El is clearly very dead, but that Jor-El is having a full fucking conversation.
right? So it's like, oh, so this is what I was saying back then. How creepily eerie this is now. Okay, all right, let's move on. Let's move on.
Yeah. I love it though, man. It
Yeah.
just really works, and I like that when the bombs are like after Lois dies and Clark gets like, "I'm gonna go back in time," and you do hear Jor-El being like, "You can't do this. Like,
Right,
you cannot interfere like this," and he's like,
right.
"I'm going to." It's
Yeah,
great.
it is. It's a powerful moment. Like it's a little dark, and the
Yeah,
score works on it in this way, and it works out, and it's okay. And it's not prepared to like. I mean, in today's day and age, we'd have to go through a. This has changed everything, and this is why it's darker and everything else. We don't have to do that, but just the idea that it could happen is enough for this movie, I think.
yeah.
But very powerful, very
It's
powerful.
so good, dude. Like, it really works. This whole movie just it
Works.
sounds so cheesy. It just is though. Like, and again, I think it's because it really earnestly wants to be a Superman film.
Yes.
And it becomes the problem that I actually have with most of the Superman movies since. Um,
You're not wrong. You're not
yeah,
wrong. I mean, I definitely Superman 2 works a lot because it is
still
obviously
Dick
meant to
Donner.
be a continuation of this film and this story. It's like it is the next logistical step to the story. Then it goes on from there, and it's just kind of like, okay, you're changing things up, and you're not at the heart. Are you telling a Superman story? Or are you telling a different story?
And weirdly enough, like Singer was the one who really tried the same thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that's why I like Returns more than a lot of people. And I think
I do
once
too.
like we'll get to it obviously, but like it's how earnestly it's trying to be a Superman film.
Which is why I think people dislike it and it gets mocked a lot is
Yes.
because it is so earnestly trying to be a part of that 78 Superman story, but it's 2006, so people aren't viewing films the same way.
I
And
know.
people are looking at it and going, "Oh, this is old hat. This is old cheesy stuff. This isn't work. It's another landmass thing. What the it's But like it's like same time, it's like, no, but this is doing its best job of continuing what was begun. So you gotta
Yeah.
kind of like leave your heart there and go. If you go with it, you try to get in that frame of mind. You could almost watch it. Like when we're gonna get Superman Returns eventually after we do, 2, 3, and 4. I might go back and rewatch Superman 1 and 2 and go right into Returns from there because that's
Yeah.
what the intention is at that point. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what you're supposed to do and have and try to feel that way because I've never tried that. 5
That's
times maybe
what
I'll
I
do
th
that.
that is what it's supposed to be, is that the idea being basically it picks although I would argue maybe that it's supposed to be more off the Lester version because the other thing that became with Returns, as we know, is that they used the footage from Superman 2 of Brando before
Right.
they put it back in from the Donner cut.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Um, they
Well, they
used it.
didn't. Yeah, they 'cause that came at the same time, but I think they had.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't because the Donner Cut wasn't coming out in the theaters. I don't believe, or if it was coming out in theaters, it was
It was
like a
like a one-night event,
brief
I think
run.
it
Yeah,
was.
exactly. So I think that makes the most sense that Singer's version had to pretend that, or at least pretend had to go in going. All right, they have seen the Lester version of Superman 2.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, it's
Actually,
just
well, it
very
works better that way too because then like I can use the Donner stuff that he didn't use, and it's kind of
right.
alive.
And that's why they did it, because at the time, it was like the idea was that the Donner cut probably still would never exist. Very
Having
interesting.
yeah, having not covered that yet, and I haven't. I look into it more when we get there. I'm kind of wondering, like I'd say we're kind of like went back. Did Superman Returns using that? Did that kind of inspire Donner to go back and do it, or was it the other way
It
around?
played a part because once
Okay.
they were like, we have this footage, they had gone to Brando's estate and they were kind of like, hey, look, we're doing a new Superman movie. There's this old footage of him that we wanted to use. Is there any chance you guys will sign off on it, basically?
Right. Right.
Because, I mean, and I think there was a little bit of digital trickery in some of the dialogue, if I'm
Yes.
remembering correctly. I need to look a little further into it.
Been a
It's been a
while since I
long
looked
time
at it.
since I've
Yeah.
looked into it, but I think there was. And so they did that, and it kind of ignited in Donner to
Yeah.
be like, look, man, clearly this footage is still existent.
Yeah. Why
Like,
don't I?
let me get my movie out.
Yeah. I'll talk about that more when it comes to. We'll come that next. That'll be our next episode.
Yeah.
The
But
Donner
I
stuff.
do
But
love that, right?
yeah.
Because I'm glad he got to do that, man. Like,
Yeah. Me too.
we'll get to it. I know I keep saying it. This movie just it works for me because it's earnest.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it's a
Richard Donner knows
Superman
how to do
movie, man.
movies.
Like it's a real Superman movie. Again, we will talk about Man of Steel and it where it lays in all of this too. But when I think of Superman, this is Superman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
This movie or Christopher Reeve? That's both, right? For
Both.
you? Okay. I will say, I'll throw it out there. For me, I think of Superman 2 only because
No,
that
and
was
it's
my
fair.
movie. That was my movie growing up. Like that was my
Yeah.
Superman movie when I was growing. Like I saw this one, but I always went back to the next one. I think the part of the reason why, and we'll talk about this definitely next episode more. But like Superman 2 is more of the, I want to say kid friendly one because it's not, but there's a little more action to it, a little more faster
Right.
paced. At that point, you have to do with the whole beginning council thing we talked about, the whole like 40-minute opening, which is wonderful to the film, but might lose a really young kid kind of
Mhm.
thing. But we'll get to
Yeah,
that.
you get the payoff.
Yeah, exactly. Get the big payoff at the end there, and you do get that big battle action sequence, which at the time was new and unique.
Right.
That was the difference. It's like you don't see that ever. You don't see that every 6 months at the new Marvel movie or the new whatever movie. It's like this is really awesome, powerful stuff going on there. Battle through New York. Wow.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but we'll get there. I mean, it's Metropolis, I know, but it's New York,
It's New York.
basically.
Dude, the very first shot of Metropolis, you see the Chrysler Building, and when they're doing the fight, you see the Statue of Liberty. And in the TV cut, he goes around the Twin Towers.
Yep.
Like,
I think it's so funny how DC did that. DC like I don't know. I never actually read about why, but they decided never to have like the real cities. They only use like this basically DC
yeah,
specific series, but they are the same. Like Metropolis is like New York, but it's like the higher end New York. While Gotham is also New York, but like the lower end of New York. It didn't
well,
have
and then
like
eventually it became that they were all kind of actually cities within our country.
right. It's a weird kind of dichotomy of it.
Yeah,
It's interesting for sure, but
yeah.
that's another conversation.
Well,
Let's
I feel like, oh, I want to say, I always love that Larry Hagman has a cameo in this. Because I grew up loving Larry Hagman because obviously he was on I Dream of Jeannie,
right.
and all of that. But the one that was always funny for me is My Mom Loves Dallas, and
Right.
I was born on a Friday night, and to this day, and I kid you not, this literally came up last week on her birthday when I went up
Mm.
to a spring training game with her and my dad. She was like, "You remember that I missed an episode of Dallas because you were born?"
Still,
To
after all
this
these
day,
years,
after all these years, I still hear about it. So because of that, I think of Larry Hagman, you son of a bitch.
son of a
Uh,
bitch.
because to this day, I have not lived down that she missed an episode of fucking Dallas when it was still on air.
That's funny. That's pretty funny. I also that's another one of those kind of like iffy moments that might not happen now. The Larry Hapman giving a mouth to mouth, and if
It-
you hear his chest
About
rub,
face,
round face again. It's humorous at the time. Iffy now, but still had a
it's a little bit questionable.
uh,
You know, it happens. But things go on. Wow, no wonder she was so mad at me. I had to look because I was like, I thought Dallas like started in the 70s. It started in 78 and ran for 14 years. So it ended in 91. I was born in
mm,
90, so I she must have missed an episode right in towards the end of the series, and that was a
right.
big deal because she didn't tape it. Should have thought about it, Mom.
It's funny. I got to say, we probably mentioned almost everything. I have a couple of notes left that I want to talk about, but we didn't really talk as much. There's so much more of the development that we didn't talk about that we should actually just touch base on, like some like trivia bits that are kind of interesting. Like they went through a lot of people for casting and for directing. That like I'm just kind of curious, like what would this film have been like had this stuff happen? Like for example, they went to George Lucas to direct
Mhm.
Star Wars or to direct Superman, but he was committed to Star Wars. One of them wanted Steven Spielberg to direct.
Yeah.
Alexander, the producer, was skeptical, feeling that it was best to wait until Spielberg's big fish opens. And then once
Boy,
that happened, Spielberg had his own stuff to do. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
yeah.
Let's wait. I don't know that Spielberg guy's gonna do good. Let's wait on him. I don't know.
Things happen, man.
But imagine Spielberg directing Superman. Holy
I
shit, that would
mean,
have been wild.
just think of all the things that Spielberg almost directed, whether it was this, whether it
Mhm.
was Harry Potter,
Whether it was a
whether
Star Wars film.
yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, he kind of did in the end.
He directed some sequences of Revenge of the Sith. Yes, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and I would argue more than not. And that's not a dig or anything. It's just the truth.
That is true.
I mean, and Bond. He wanted a Bond movie badly.
Mhm.
Imagine a freaking Steven Spielberg directed Bond film.
You still could now. But
Yeah, well, they'll know. Well, I don't know if he wants to anything to do with that at this point.
yeah, I don't know either. But that'd be the one. That's the one way Amazon can salvage that for me a little bit is to give
It
an
would be that
auteur
or Nolan.
director, right? Give an auteur director, a director like free reign to do something and make it cool. Then I could go. I could get on board with that. No, if they give Nolan like final cut and he does it, I'm excited about that. I'm
Yeah,
excited about that to say.
I gotta say, I've tried to be real fucking quiet about this ultimately because I have a lot of feelings about it. I don't think inherently you could like. I think actually a James Bond TV series would be great. Don't get me wrong. Like I think you could do a good James Bond TV series,
Absolutely.
but I didn't want it like this. Like I
Yeah,
didn't want any of this to go down the way that it did. And the fact that Jeff Bezos is like a real life Bond villain, and this whole thing of like, you had Barbara Broccoli being like he doesn't fucking know what he's doing and him being like, I don't care what it takes, just get rid of her. Like, that's the
right.
most Bondian shit you could ever say. And it was like, you could just read defeat in
Mhm.
her announcement. I mean, good for her that her and her family are still going to get money out of it. But, like, dude, this whole thing it just comes off as shady.
Yeah, I agree. I
And it
don't like
sucks because,
it's
like,
icky.
yeah, it does. And, like, I want a Bond movie every couple of years, like, or every few years or whatever it is. And then immediately Bezos is like, "Well, now that I own Bond, who do you guys wanna see as Bond?" Like, don't go to the fans. Don't be doing
Yeah,
that shit on fucking Twitter. Like, what are you doing? And
exactly.
because that plays in exactly to the problem of all this. You
Agreed.
have no vision.
Right. You're looking for whatever happens. Like you're looking for like, I throw shit on the wall and see what sticks. And it's like, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it.
No. Like, you lack vision and you lack foresight for any of this, and now you're only giving people a reason to be angry. Like, fuck you, man. Like, I just wanted a good Bond movie, and honestly, I think there's some unfortunate truth to I think with No Time to Die
Mhm.
ending the way that it did, I think it really put them in a precarious situation, and I think that the Broccolis were feeling it in the same way
Yeah.
of, like, how do you kinda move forward from this? Because
Right.
it was the first time that Bond had, like, a definitive beginning, middle, and end.
Right. Exactly. So now it's actually like a reboot instead of like before it was always kind of like it's like Doctor Who, went from different character,
Yeah,
different actor, same type, episodic kind of thing. There was no
yeah.
real through line going on, and then all of a sudden there was, and it's like, oh, now this is a different way to do it. Not a bad way to do it, but it's like,
No.
oh, but this makes it a little harder to move on now at this point. You can't just jump to the next Doctor, can't just jump to the next Bond at this point. It's strange,
No.
but it's
No, it
going to
totally
see how it
is.
goes for
And
sure.
it's so funny because all I can think of to that point is part of the reason it was kind of a problem, through line wise was because they kind of repeated the same story twice at one point where it was like, "Hey, man, so we meet Bond, and he's young, and he's charismatic, and he's gonna become Bond," and then in 3 movies, they're like, "He's too old, he's too." We've seen literally 1 mission, by the way, and then
Right.
it gets to the Skyfall, and they're like, "He's too old to be doing this anymore, like, he's falling apart, he's dying, and all this shit," and you're like, "I'm sorry, what?"
Just
Then
started.
then he keeps going, and Spectre
Right.
happens, and then they get to No Time to Die, and they're like, "He's too old to be Bond anymore. We can't do this anymore. He's retired, and he needs to be pulled out." You're like, "What is happening?"
That is
Like,
happening here.
why are we doing this twice? Like, we can't have that story in as Daniel Craig's Bond twice. What are we doing?
I can see a time when, like, years from now, after we cover everything else we wanted to do, that we could do a Bond run through at some point, perhaps a certain specific Bond run through at some point.
Yeah, in a similar way that we've been doing the MCU, it might be best to like break it up
Yeah, at the
because
time, maybe do that. Maybe we'll see.
it's long. It's going to be long. I mean, there's
Yeah.
25 of those
At
movies.
least we could do it. We have definitive like things we could do in chunks of each Bond, get its own thing.
Yeah,
Although
exactly.
then that's poor Lazenby because the one off. But
Well, that never happened to the other guy. Remember?
that's true. Yeah.
That's my favorite line is him looking at the camera and going, "That never happened to the other guy." Like Bond just broke the fourth wall and talked to the audience. What the fuck is
What
happening?
just happened here?
I'll say this: that movie is great.
Yeah.
George is not.
No, I don't. I agree. I'm not a big fan of. I like the movie, but it's. I would have been interested to see him try a second time.
I would have
had
too.
potential. But it just because sometimes it's the same with the Doctor. Like when we do the Doctor, it always takes you a couple episodes to kind of like
Yeah.
get into that. Like hell, when David Tennant took over for Christopher Eccleston, I was like, I want Eccleston, I want my Doctor at that point. But like, I love Tennant now, and it's like, that's the way it happens every time.
I think the one good smart thing with Doctor Who that they've always managed to do is that it always seems like they try to film a couple of the like later episodes first, so that when they finally do the regen episode, it feels a little more like the character is lived in.
Right.
Because the actor has finally gotten into the role, and I think it always lands a little better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It
makes it easier to stomach for sure.
So going back to one of the other productions stuff with Superman, I would say like there's other like the interesting choice we always mentioned Christopher Reeve being cast. Like look at the actors that were involved. Probably Robert Redford was offered money.
Clint Eastwood.
Burt Reynolds turned down the role. Sylvester Stallone was interested, but Donner said no, thanks.
probably for the best.
Yeah. Paul Newman was offered his choice of roles as Superman, Lex Luthor, or Jor-El, but he turned down all three.
Paul Newman's like, no, thanks. I have an animated movie about cars to make.
Caitlyn Jenner was auditioning for the title role back in the day. Patrick Wayne was cast, but had to drop out when his father John was diagnosed with cancer. Like all these like amazing, like I can't even imagine. Nick Nolte, who wanted to play Superman as a schizophrenic. Like, what are we doing here? What are these thoughts going on?
That's up there with, I want Sean Penn to be Superman because I see in him, the eyes of a caged animal, a killer. And you're like, I'm sorry, what?
So funny. It's just amazing. But let's see. I got a few more notes about the film itself before we wrap things up.
Also, real quick,
you want to talk about?
Yeah. You know what's really funny to me? And this is more about, that because Donner before this had done The Omen.
Right.
And he was getting ready to do The Omen too. And then he was like, I'm going to do Superman instead.
The Omen is what got us Superman.
I know.
As it is. That's impressive. As a horror podcast, by the way, I got to throw it out there. I almost feel like I have to change our theme music. I still almost feel like that way because like our theme music was on when we were specifically a horror podcast. So it's kind of got a horror theme. And when now it comes out, we're doing all these superhero movies. We still have that horror theme. Maybe I'll keep it as another thing. And people are like, "What the hell is this?" And I'll laugh at it.
And it is what it is. Things have happened, man. Like we're well into this at this point.
Exactly. But no, you're not wrong. The Omen, as boys with our horror root, this podcast started as a horror podcast. We haven't done the Omen series. We actually might do a couple of Omen run through at some point. The Omen, especially with some other good stuff potentially coming out with it hopefully in the future.
You know who's in the Omen?
Who's in
Patrick
the Omen?
Troughton.
Mm-hmm.
The Doctor.
It does have a good connection there, that's for sure. So our horror roots got a Superman. So good for Donner there and directing one of the greatest horror movies of all time and getting us one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. Some could argue the greatest superhero movie of all time. I
mean, I would argue that if it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't have the superhero boom that we have come to know and love.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny. I think that Richard Donner, as well liked as he is actually potentially underrated. Like I feel like he's not mentioned with all of the people that he should be mentioned. But you look at his track record: The Omen, Superman, The Toy, The Goonies, The Lethal Weapons 1, 2, 3, and 4, Scrooge, one of my favorite Christmas classic, Maverick, even Conspiracy Theory, which I loved. I thought it was a fun movie. Assassins was a fun movie.
Mhm.
He
Even
made like
16
good movies.
Blocks, so you could argue
Yeah,
one of Bruce Willis's later, like, great movies.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Donner, I think what it is, because 'cause I'm with you, I think he's very underappreciated and underseen in a lot of, just in general in his filmmaking and stuff, but I think
Mhm.
what it is that he kinda gets looked at as a journeyman director and maybe in the wrong way, because
Yeah,
he's not like a guy like Spielberg where you watch a movie and you're like, "That's a Spielberg movie," or you watch a Nolan movie and you're like, "That's a Nolan movie." Like,
right.
Donner doesn't have that, "Oh,
Signature.
it's a" yeah, like,
Yeah.
and that's not a bad thing. I think people actually really underappreciate a really great director who is really good at locking in and just making a good movie,
Right,
like, without the flourish of being Steven Spielberg, without
right,
being Christopher Nolan.
right.
And I think that's where Donner gets lost in the shuffle because it's really unfortunate. The dude is one of the all-time great filmmakers, in my opinion. I don't think we talk about it like Rob Reiner. Rob
Mhm.
Reiner also arguably has one of the greatest film runs of all time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you watch a Rob Reiner movie, and Rob Reiner movies look like they could have been directed by anyone.
Yeah, he is a journeyman type. You said about journeyman type director, even though you look at you're like, oh, he did that. Oh, yeah, that's right, he did that. He did that. Oh my god. Oh, he did the Princess Bride. What?
Yeah,
He did Stand by Me. What? He did
yeah,
When Harry Met Sally. What?
huh?
Uh, um,
Few Good
the
Men.
Thank you. Feel good. Come on, I said Goodwill Men. I'm like, what is that? I don't know what the Goodwill Men is, but I am getting old. I'm sorry, but yes, Few Good Men. Thank you. Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap. Like so
Oh,
many great films.
100%, man. And
American
again,
President.
like, here's the thing, right?
Misery.
Yeah,
Us horror
yeah.
guys. I got to mention that.
So from 1984 to 1992, I would argue it's one of the greatest runs of any filmmaker of all time when you have Spinal Tap, The Sure Thing, Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men, all in a
Yeah.
row. The only reason that it doesn't go to 95 is because North is right between those, and North
Right.
is kind of terrible. But, like, dude, he even made Ghosts of Mississippi.
Yeah.
Like, the dude is an incredible fucking filmmaker.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I love the guy, and yeah, I can't wait for Spinal Tap too.
I think
I'm
it's going
excited
to be
about
great.
that. It's gonna be fun. The teaser just it
It was a
understands what it's
perfect
doing.
teaser.
Yeah,
It was a
exactly.
perfect teaser. It was exactly what it needed to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, got a few more notes I had written down just for the movie itself, Superman itself. I want to mention we didn't really talk much about the Fortress of Solitude and the building of the Fortress of Solitude with the crystal.
A
Um,
great moment.
when I was younger and my kids, I was a kid, I had this playset, this Star Wars playset from Hoth. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was like this small little playset of snow, and it really didn't make any sense. But it was like a trench, and it was not even in Empire Strikes Back the way it was, but it was still kind of whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But it I loved it. It looked exactly like the Fortress of Solitude. Like it had like this, like the way that the steps were made. It looked exactly like those steps that are in the Fortress of Solitude. I always love that. I think it's so well done. It's so because it doesn't look real,
Yeah.
but that's what makes it good in a way.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it's like okay, this is almost magical in a way. It's kind of cool, but
It's whimsical.
it's whimsical. It's a great word for it. Great word for it. Yeah.
And again, remember, childlike whimsy because
Yes.
a child is reading the comic book.
Margot Kidder. I didn't talk about her enough. I always
We
find it
really
funny.
didn't.
I will say I always got funny. Like I remember when she shows up in like the zombie Halloween 2, and I was like, "That's Margot Kidder." Holy
Mhm.
shit, where's it come? But she is phenomenal in this. And I love the
Yes.
quirk she gives Lois. The
Yes.
spelling stuff,
Yes.
the misspelling every word, like it's something that continues throughout the entire thing. And it's so funny. It's such a running bit. This great journalist, this great writer, she is like one of the best in the world, and she can't spell to save her life. And
I love
it's so funny how she adds to that, though.
No, it's so good, and honestly, we didn't talk about this scene enough either of when they first meet on, the apartment rooftop
Rooftop.
before the
Yep.
fly,
Mm.
because, like, it's so charming, she's so good, the questions she's asking, and then she's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, I've embarrassed you," and little things like that. It's so good. Again, it's why it's so romantic.
Yeah.
Like, the flirtation is palpable, the chemistry is palpable, like, there's a little bit of the Clark Kent coming through, and then even every time she was like, "Clark says you're not real."
Yep. Yep. Who's Clark? Your boyfriend?
Yeah. No. Clark is no one. Clark is no one, and him kind of being like,
Hmm.
he kind of winks and like has a sly smile, like I don't know, things like that. It's because she's so good. It's because their chemistry was so good, and it's really. I've heard a lot of people say they don't actually like Margot Kidder in
Uh,
this role, and I've always thought that was so strange. I think she's so wonderful in it.
I love that also it's a little bit like a little risque for the
And what
movie it's
color is my
in.
underwear?
Color where he's like, pink. Like, oh, do you like pink? I like pink. It's like,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just, oh, that's a little dirty. You guys get a little dirty for Superman there. Come on. But,
yeah, yeah.
but it works. It still works. So it's great. It comes off like almost innocent, but not.
Yeah, exactly. It comes off as still innocent at
Yeah.
least. Like, it's really good.
Yeah. There you go. Oh, let's see. Got a couple things. The missile code sequence was one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Otis and the missile codes. What did you say? 117? It's supposed to be 11, then 7. Mr. Luthor, I'm a redder.
Oh,
Mr. Luthor.
Otis.
He jumps back.
Oh, Otis.
Oh, another Otis bit I loved. Otis, take the gentleman's cape. He runs up to go Superman
Yeah.
and like, stops.
Mr. Luthor, I don't think he wants me to take the cape.
Great look by Christopher
Yeah.
Reeve there. Just looks at him. Don't even come near.
Don't even try.
And finally, I gotta give credit's due. John Ratzenberger, king of the cameos. Hey,
Oh, I know.
Empire Strikes Back. He's in this one as the missile control guy and everything else.
Yeah.
I love it. Every time I see it, like it's Cliff, and he's.
Well,
doing
did you actually, to that point, did you catch one of my favorites is Donner has his own cameo.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
A man can fly, that'll be the day.
I love that. That's such a funny bit too.
Yeah.
You know what? I never mentioned this. I forget to mention this, but what Donner does really well, if it was like a signature moment for him, and I don't know if this is necessarily, but in Superman specifically, it's the background characters always have like these great little one-liners like around the story.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about like the guy when Clark first, or it's Christopher Reeve's first dressed as Superman and flies up. You see that guy out there goes, "Oh, wait, that's a fat outfit, then." He starts talking to Clark about the outfit he's wearing. It's always like background characters. They're so colorful, they're so vibrant. And it's always something going on. Mooney, God, I love the Mooney. The officer Mooney. He's like,
yes,
big blooper, sky, the Irish cop. And then they go out there and they see Superman fly. It's like, Mooney, go to the bar. I'll be right there. First bottle's on me.
God, it's so good. That moment is so great.
So many good, like Donner's great at populating the world with these characters. That one line in and out, fun, vibrant energy keeps the story going. Love it.
God, it's so good, dude.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
So good. So, all right. Anything last? That's all I got for my notes.
No, man, I feel like I am. I've done the thing.
We have done the thing. We are finishing
I've
up.
said the thing. I've done a lot. We have had many a conversation.
Superman the movie. So now we have to rank it because we always rank things here on PLD Projects.
Can I just say, I'm so proud of us.
I remember
it's a podcast that's shorter than the movie.
Yeah, it's true. Only because it's like this is an extended version. I don't know about the actual length.
Yeah, I was going to say honestly, it's only because the movie is 2.5 hours.
But we always rank things on PLD Projects. We always turn things up to 11 because it's always a scale of 1 to 11. So on a scale of 1 to 11, PJ Campbell, where do you put Superman the movie?
I mean, I think this is going to come as no shock to anyone. We turned that dial up to 11, baby.
Good Spinal Tap reference. Look at that. We made it work. 11 as well for me. And you know what? I'll point it out there. We are generally a positive duo. We are going to give movies higher rankings than you will probably because that's what we do. We love film. I don't care. I'm unabashed.
I'm not looking to be cynical.
No, I'm not looking to be cynical. So we've given a fair number of 11s out there, but I think every film that we've given 11 to has been deserved of it. And this is a iconic movie, an iconic thing, and I'm happy.
Here's the thing, right? Like this is up there for me. If we gave like Nightmare on Elm Street and Lord of the Rings and Raiders of the Lost Ark, like and the original Halloween, like legitimate masterpieces of cinema, and I think that this counts as one of them.
John Wick.
Yeah,
the original John Wick.
Those are 11 movies. You dial that, you turn that dial up because that is what this movie is. Look, maybe for you, this Superman isn't your Superman. Maybe this movie doesn't work for you because you were younger when you saw it. You don't feel the same thing that we feel while we watch it. Fine,
Right.
fair enough, whatever. I'm not trying to dismiss you, but like, I know that there's this weird, fervent part of the fan base that really doesn't like people being super reminiscent of this film and so
Right.
positive about this film, but that's just who we are. And that this movie matters this much to us. Like, I remember the first time I watched this on VHS as a kid, man. Like, I remember what it meant to me then, and I remember what it means to me now. And I
Mhm.
rewatched all of our movies for this podcast, and I watched this yesterday, and I was as taken by it at 35 as I was when I was a kid.
Yeah. Same.
That's what it is. Like,
Absolutely same.
so if you don't love it, cool, man. That's fine. You don't have to come in here and argue with us.
100%. And I gotta say, it's gonna be fun for us. This journey is gonna be very fun for us, especially going back and forth for a little while for the first, because while we're recording Superman, we do our show every other week, as you know, it's a bi-weekly podcast. But on the off weeks, we are recording our MCU rewatch on Patreon. If you'd like to join us, patreon.com/PLD Projects, and also as
Subtle.
a YouTube member.
Nice. Well done.
Thank you, thank you. But it's kind of fun because we're going from like these movies to more of it today's movies. I mean, I know it's hard to say today's movie when Iron Man was almost 15 years old now at this point, almost getting closer to 20. Jesus. But we are watching Superman, going back and forth. Last week we did Iron Man. We recorded the Incredible Hulk, which I mentioned up top. Some of you cheeky bastards got an early view of it, and but then we're going back. I get to watch Iron Man 2 this week for next week's recording, and then I get to watch Superman 2, the Donner cut. I can't wait to get to the Donner cut. I'm just so excited to watch this and jump into it headlong again. And so I think it's gonna be a wonderful time, and I'm having such a great time with you doing this. This has been a fun run already, and I'm all in.
I am too. It's funny because we talk about it a lot behind the scenes. I think I've had more fun, weirdly enough, as much as I love all of her, I like our doing horror movies and stuff. When we start doing the stuff that's not that, I start getting more excited again because like we did Lord of the Rings, we did Indiana Jones, we've done Lethal Weapon, now we're doing these, and it's like, God, they're good, dude. They're fucking good, and I have so much fun doing it. And it just brings a different kind of energy because we're talking about things a little differently than we normally do, and it's really fun.
Absolutely, and we're always gonna be horror boys. No,
Oh
no
yeah.
doubt. We love our horror movies, but also at the same time too, we are a franchise show. We know about franchises, and we know that every franchise in horror movies has some real duds. And
Looking at you, Annabelle.
I'm looking at you, 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ugh,
And
my
that's
soul
what
just
Superman
left my
doesn't.
body again.
I mean, that's Superman doesn't. I mean, Superman 4 probably is the worst earnestly made movie here.
Yeah.
Movie with a great heart and like great intentions, a great heart, but
Thanks, Canon Films.
right? Thanks, Canon Films, exactly. Um, but overall, it's kind of nice getting to do some of these really iconic films and go through them for sure. So I can't wait to get through them at all with you. And of course, we're leading up to James Gunn's Superman, and that's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
And don't forget, if you're watching this now and you're on the Patreon, next month we're going to be talking about Doctor Who because it'll be the Christmas special.
That's right. That's right.
But if you're not on the Patreon, we are still going to be talking about Doctor Who next
Well, actually,
month.
this one is going out live today, so we can talk about it now.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're yeah. But this month or next month we're going to be talking about Doctor Who anyway. So
Right.
either way, it still remains the same because Doctor Who comes back next month,
That's
and
right.
that's great too.
That's going to be a weekly podcast for us. We're actually going to do some double duty recordings that way. We have 8 episodes in a row, 8 weeks in a row. We're just going to be doing Doctor Who, and every other week still recording our normal Superman run, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're on the Patreon, just so you know, we are going to take a little bit of a break on our MCU. I know we just started it, but for that 8-week period, we don't have time to do 3 podcasts a week.
Jesus Christ. So, we have barely the time to do what we do as it is.
I know. So we're going to do Doctor Who, and then we'll do our normal mainstream run. And then after Doctor Who's done, we'll get back to finishing up the MCU phase 1 and go from there. But after that, our schedule right now, that's going to change. I mean, I scheduled out for like 2 years. Obviously, it's going to change when things happen.
This is not, you guys have no idea. This legitimately happened last week. He was nonstop like I hadn't gotten a chance to reply to him. And I'm just getting these big ass, like, blocks of text messaging about the scheduling, and he's like, so here we are in 2026, and I was all, motherfucker, I'm going downstairs to have lunch, like, give me a chance to respond.
It's true. I get obsessed with like figuring things out. Spreadsheet is I have this, I'm moving X's over here, O's over here, and stuff. And
My
it's
favorite
all going to
was you were
change
like,
anyway.
"I
That's
promise this is the last one," and then there was another one like 20 minutes later, and I was like, "God damn it, Paul, walk away for like 2 minutes."
especially because like in 2 months we're gonna have to change because you get sick or I get sick or something happens. It's
Yeah.
like we're changing it all anyway. But at least I have it mapped out. But mapping it out, we should be doing Patreon as soon as the Doctor Who's done for a little while. We're gonna pump through a lot of these MCU stuff for you. We'll get through all the MCU stuff as quickly as we can. Because it's a big commitment, obviously, 30 plus projects. Oh, and yeah, we should talk about the our decision we made because of that text chain. I'll announce it here, and if you're on the Patreon, I'll announce it too. We initially talked about doing the MCU TV series as well, and
I told you it got too complicated too quickly.
It was out there. Like we were through 2020, we were almost into 2027 and not done yet, and it's like. Because we had to, obviously, we'd have to like it would be more than a week's worth of recording. We try to do every week for the MCU stuff, recording wise, at least getting ahead of it and all. That's like you can't watch an entire series in a week and really give it its due. So
not just that, it also became complicated because you have to look at the Netflix stuff, and then you have to look at Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then you have to look at Agent Carter, and like you start snowballing real fast.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bree. I know that's not what you want to hear because Bree, our friend Bree, put on Blue Sky. She's like, "Oh, Agent Carter, do an Agent Carter episode. Maybe we'll do specifically Agent Carter episode on Patreon or something later on. Potentially, we'll do that. Maybe." But as far as the mainstream things, I think it was just easier if we just concentrate on movies because we're a film podcast anyway. We're not a television show podcast. That's not how we're running things.
Unless you're Doctor Who. But that's also a separate show.
Separate show. I mean, I guess technically we did do the one Freddy's Nightmares episode, but that's just
but that was like the one-time thing. Look, had Jason actually ended up in Supernatural, we probably would have talked about that episode of Supernatural also.
There you go. Bingo for there. So yeah, we'll probably just do the MCU, just the films. That's okay. That's okay. But that's neither here nor there. That's Patreon. Join us if you can. If not, I understand that too. You'll get them eventually. But for now, you're getting some great Superman content every other week for Superman until James Gunn's movie. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Leave comments. Tell us what you think about this movie. Tell us what you think about your favorite superheroes movie. We're going to talk about it. We love that. We love answering comments. And leave us a 5-star rating if you're on the audio side of things on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, anything like that. PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me wherever podcasts and social medias are sold at PJ Campbell. Mostly these days overall on the Blue Skies and the Instagrams. I don't really go on the bad place anymore. I'm in the good place instead. And so the bad place is like my account is still there. You could probably follow me, but I'm not there anymore. I just don't use it.
Yeah, I do it only for like entertainment news sometimes, but I'm generally at Blue Sky. My home is definitely Blue Sky. I don't even do Instagram only because I just never have. So Blue Sky is pretty much my home. Paul _Denuzio on the old Blue Sky. I'm all over this channel, obviously. My name is on the tin, as Matty Gunner used to say, or still says. I do a Star Wars podcast every week. Holy Snokes, if you're into that. I do a show about V, that 1980s sci-fi franchise with Lego, another co-host of mine. Fun there. Class Action Live's coming up this month in our tribute to Gene Hackman. We're doing Crimson Tide versus Enemy of the State. A lot of fun. 2 Tony Scott films, 2 Gene Hackman films. A lot of fun. Both they were. I just rewatched them. A lot of fun having
Enemy of the State.
And then good stuff there. And yeah, I do my Queen podcast on the sister channel as well. Every week I do a new Queen song as I go through the entirety of the Queen catalog. But that'll do it for this week, guys. And we will see you next time on 2 Middle Aged Geeks on Film. See Public, you can get our merch if you want to do that.
Wear my face on your chest.
Where exactly my face too. Kim, by the way, doesn't like these. Like, you look weird. I did about me. I'm like, you look weird. I'm like, thanks. I love you too, honey.
Yeah, but look how sexy I am. So, like, I mean, it's okay. You can come and hang out with me. I think you look great too.
Well, thanks, honey. I appreciate that. I will see you next time on 2 Middle Aged Geeks on Film. I'm PLD. That's PJ Campbell. Peace out.